Mrs. Patricia Holloway's fingers closed around the child's essay like claws. A 4-star general. She spat the words like venom. You a black girl from the projects whose mother scrubs toilets for white families. She ripped the paper in half. The sound cut through the silent classroom like a gunshot. 10-year-old Zora Williams stood frozen, watching pieces of her heart flutter to the floor. That's not ambition, child. Mrs. Holloway ripped again and again. That's mental illness. That's a disease called delusion. 23 children watched. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And in my classroom, the teacher's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled every corner. We do not reward liars. We cure them. 3 miles away at the Pentagon, Lieutenant General Marcus Williams had just received a text that would change everything. But he was in a meeting about national security, a meeting more important than his daughter's tears, or so he thought. Before we continue, I want to invite you to subscribe to our channel and follow Zora's journey to the very end. Leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel across the world. Now let's go back to where it all began. Grace Williams knew something was wrong the moment her daughter came downstairs. Zora was wearing her blue dress, the one Grace had found at Goodwill, and spent 3 nights altering until it fit perfectly. She had brushed her hair until it shone. She was clutching a folder against her chest like it contained the secrets of the universe. Mama, is Daddy awake? Grace's hands paused over the eggs she was scrambling. That question, that desperate, hopeful question she had heard 1,000 times before. He left early, baby. Pentagon business. But he said he'd try to come today. He promised. He said he'd try. Trying isn't promising. Damni! Zora's face crumpled for just a moment before she forced it back into composure. Grace recognized that expression. It was the same one Marcus wore when he was pretending everything was fine. Can I at least tell them about him at career day? Grace turned off the stove and knelt down so she was eye level with her daughter. What exactly are you planning to say? Zora opened her folder and pulled out 3 pages of careful handwriting. I wrote an essay about Daddy, about what he really does. Grace's blood ran cold. Zora, we've talked about this. Your father's job is classified. We can't just... I didn't say anything classified. Mama, I just said he's a general. That's public record, right? That's not a secret. Baby, the world doesn't work the way you think it does. Then tell me how it works. Zora's voice cracked with frustration. Madison Crawford gets to brag about her daddy's hedge fund. Tyler Chen's mom is bringing a model of a human heart. Everyone else gets to be proud. Why can't I? Grace opened her mouth to explain, but the words caught in her throat. How do you tell a 10-year-old that some people will never believe her no matter what she says? How do you explain that the color of her skin and the size of their apartment will matter more to some people than the truth? Zora, listen to me carefully. Grace gripped her daughter's shoulders. You can tell them about your father. You can be proud. But some people are not going to believe you. They're going to look at where we live and what I do for work, and they're going to decide you're lying. Are you ready for that? But I'm not lying. I know you're not, but that might not matter. Zora's jaw tightened. It was Marcus's jaw, Marcus's stubborn determination. I don't care if they believe me or not. I'm telling the truth. Grace stared at her daughter for a long moment. Then she pulled her into a fierce hug. That's my brave girl. But remember what your father always says. The truth doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be true. That's right. Grace kissed her forehead. Now go. You'll miss your bus. Zora grabbed her backpack and headed for the door, but she stopped with her hand on the knob. Mama, if Daddy finishes his meeting early, will you tell him to come, please? I'll tell him, baby, I promise. The door closed and Grace was alone in the small kitchen of their modest apartment. She picked up her phone and stared at it for a long moment. Then she typed a message to her husband. She's going to tell them today, about you, about everything. She's wearing her brave face, but Marcus, she's just a child. She needs her father, please. She hit send and waited. The response came 30 seconds later. In briefing until 10. We'll try to get out early. Tell her I love her. Try. That word again. Always trying, never doing. Always almost there. Never actually present. Grace set down the phone and started getting ready for work. She had 3 houses to clean today. 3 wealthy families who would never know that the woman scrubbing their toilets was married to a man who could order airstrikes. That was the life they had chosen. Security through invisibility, Marcus called it. Today, Grace wondered if that invisibility would cost them their daughter's spirit. The bus ride took 45 minutes. Zora sat in the back watching the neighborhoods transform outside her window. Small apartments gave way to big houses. Old cars gave way to new ones. Her world gave way to theirs. Her phone buzzed. A text from Isaiah Parker. You ready? She typed back, I think so, you. Dad's not coming, has to work, but I wrote about him anyway. That's good, he deserves it. So does your dad. You still gonna tell them? Zora looked at her essay, 3 pages of truth that suddenly felt very heavy in her hands. Yes. What if they don't believe you? Then I'll make them believe. She put her phone away and watched Westbrook Academy appear in the distance. Red brick, white columns, American flags. It looked like a place where truth should matter. It looked like a place where justice should live. She had no idea how wrong she was. The classroom was chaos when she arrived. Parents everywhere, displays and presentations and expensive suits. The air smelled like money and confidence. Mrs. Patricia Holloway stood at the center of it all, greeting each parent with a smile that showed too many teeth. Mr. Crawford, so wonderful to see you. That suit is simply divine. Dr. Chen, how is the hospital? I hear you saved the governor's nephew last month. Senator Morrison's office sent flowers. How thoughtful. Please take the seat of honor in the front row. Zora slipped into her desk in the back corner, trying to make herself invisible. It didn't work. Mrs. Holloway's eyes found her immediately. Zora Williams, I see your mother couldn't make it today. Again. She has to work, Mrs. Holloway. Yes, cleaning houses, isn't it? The teacher's voice carried across the room. Several parents glanced over. Such honest work, such humble work. The word humble was a knife, and Mrs. Holloway knew exactly where to place it. Isaiah Parker dropped into the desk next to Zora. His eyes were red-rimmed. He'd been crying, she could tell, but he'd never admit it. You okay? She whispered. My dad walked past the classroom this morning, carrying a mop. Madison Crawford laughed. Zora's hands clenched into fists. She's a horrible person. She's a rich person. Same thing. Mrs. Holloway clapped her hands. Attention, everyone. Our career day presentations will begin shortly. Parents, please take your seats. Children, I hope you've all completed your essays about your parents' careers. Remember, we celebrate all kinds of work here at Westbrook. All kinds. Her eyes swept to Zora and Isaiah when she said all kinds. The message was clear. The presentations began at 9 o'clock. Mr. Crawford went first. Hedge funds, investment portfolios, compound interest. He used words that none of the children understood, but he said them with such confidence that everyone nodded along anyway. Remember, kids, he concluded. With a wink, money makes money. The key is to start with enough of it. Mrs. Holloway applauded like he had just cured cancer. Brilliant, a true titan of industry. Dr. Chen was next. She brought a plastic model of a heart and talked about saving lives. She was softer than Mr. Crawford, more genuine, but she still moved through the world with the ease of someone who had never been questioned. Then Senator Morrison's chief of staff. Then an architect. Then a tech CEO. Then a venture capitalist. One by one, the parents of Westbrook Academy paraded their success. And one by one, Mrs. Holloway praised them like they were gods walking among mortals. Then it was time for the children's essays. Madison Crawford, please come to the front. Madison walked to the podium with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. She read about her father's hedge fund, about their vacation home in the Hamptons, about the yacht they were buying next summer. Wonderful, Mrs. Holloway beamed. Your father is a true role model. Tyler Chen. Tyler talked about his mother's surgical practice, about the lives she saved, about the awards on their wall. Extraordinary, a family of healers. One by one, the children of privilege shared their stories. And one by one, Mrs. Holloway validated their existence. Then she called on Isaiah Parker. The room shifted. Parents exchanged glances. Someone coughed. Isaiah walked slowly to the front, his essay trembling in his hands. Zora could see the sweat on his forehead. My father is James Parker. He began, his voice barely audible. He is the head custodian at Westbrook Academy. Silence. A few muffled snickers. He wakes up at 4 a.m. every day. He makes sure the building is clean and safe before any of us get here. He fixes the heat when it breaks. He unclogs the toilets when they overflow. He does the jobs nobody wants to do, but everybody needs. Madison Crawford whispered something to the girl next to her. They both laughed. Isaiah's voice grew stronger. My mom says my dad is a hero because he serves other people. She says the world needs people like him. I am proud of my father. I think what he does matters. And I think everyone in this school should say thank you to him more. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Then one of the parents started clapping, then another. Within seconds, half the room was applauding. Mrs. Holloway's smile had frozen on her face. This was not how it was supposed to go. The janitor's son was not supposed to get applause. "Thank you, Isaiah," she said through gritted teeth. "That was adequate. Please sit down." Isaiah walked back to his desk with his head held high. As he passed Zora, he grabbed her hand and squeezed. "Your turn," he whispered. "Show them." Mrs. Holloway's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. "Zora Williams." Every head turned. Zora stood up. Her legs felt weak, but she forced them to carry her to the front of the room. She could feel Mrs. Holloway's eyes on her like a physical weight. She placed her essay on the podium and took a deep breath. "My father is Lieutenant General Marcus Williams of the United States Army." The room went absolutely silent. "He has served our country for 28 years. He has been deployed to combat zones 4 times. He has 17 medals in a drawer in his study, but he never talks about them. He says the real heroes are the soldiers who didn't come home." Mrs. Holloway's expression was shifting, hardening into something ugly. "My father works at the Pentagon. He helps make decisions that keep our country safe. He can't tell me what he does most of the time because it's classified, but I know it's important because sometimes he comes home with a look in his eyes that scares me." The parents were exchanging glances now, confused, skeptical. "My mother is Grace Williams. She came to America from Jamaica when she was 22. She was a nurse, but now she runs her own cleaning business. She says there's no shame in honest work, and my father says her job is harder than his because she does it without an army behind her." Zora looked up from her paper, meeting the eyes of her classmates. "I am proud of both my parents. They taught me that service doesn't have a rank. It only has a heart." Silence. Then Mrs. Holloway laughed. It was not a kind laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had just heard the most ridiculous thing in the world. "A lieutenant general, a 3-star general." She stood up from her desk and walked toward Zora with slow, deliberate steps. "Living in Riverside Heights, in that little apartment complex by the highway." The laughter spread through the room, parents shifting uncomfortably, children snickering behind their hands. "Mrs. Holloway, it's true. My father really is." "Your father, the teacher interrupted, "is listed on your school registration as a government employee. I checked this morning. Government employee, not general, not soldier, just another bureaucrat pushing papers in some cubicle somewhere." "My mother wrote that for security reasons. My father told her to." "Security reasons?" Mrs. Holloway's voice dripped with mockery. "Oh, I see. Your father is so important that he has to hide. So important that he lives in a 2-bedroom apartment. So important that his wife cleans houses for a living." She was standing directly in front of Zora now, looking down at her with undisguised contempt. "Let me tell you something, child. I have been teaching at this school for 22 years. I have had generals' children in my classroom. Real generals' children. They don't ride the bus. They don't wear clothes from Goodwill. Their mothers don't come to parent conferences smelling like bleach." Zora felt the tears building behind her eyes. "You're wrong." "Am I?" Mrs. Holloway turned to address the room. "Class parents, this is what happens when we allow children to live in fantasy worlds. This is what happens when we don't teach them the difference between dreams and reality." She turned back to Zora and snatched the essay from her hands. "Your father is not a general. Your father is a liar, and apparently so are you." "I'm not lying." "Then prove it." Mrs. Holloway held up the essay. "Where are his medals? Where's his uniform? Where's the fancy car and the big house and the security detail? If your father is who you say he is, where is he right now?" Zora's voice came out as a whisper. "He had a meeting at the Pentagon. He said he would try to come." "Try?" Mrs. Holloway seized on the word. "Try? Not I will be there. Not I'm on my way. Just try. Does that sound like a 3-star general to you? Does that sound like a man who commands armies?" She held up the essay between 2 fingers like it was contaminated. "This is a fantasy. A sad, desperate fantasy from a sad, desperate little girl who wants to feel important." The first tear escaped down Zora's cheek. She hated herself for it. "I'm giving you one chance." Mrs. Holloway said, her voice dropping to a cold whisper. "Tell me the truth right now. Tell me your father is just a government worker. Tell me you made this up because you wanted attention. Apologize to this class for wasting our time, and I'll let you go back to your seat without any further consequences." Zora looked at the floor, at the expensive shoes of the parents, at the designer sneakers of her classmates, at her own shoes bought on clearance, carefully maintained. She thought about her father, about his medals, about his uniform, about the way he looked at her like she was the most important thing in the world. No, Mrs. Holloway blinked. Excuse me? No. Zora's voice was stronger now. I won't apologize for telling the truth. My father is a general, my mother is a hero, and you are a bully. A gasp rippled through the room. Mrs. Holloway's face went red, then white, then red again. How dare you speak to me that way? How dare you call me a liar when you don't know anything about my family? I know exactly what I need to know. Mrs. Holloway's voice was shaking with rage. I know where you live. I know what your mother does. I know that people like you don't become generals' daughters. That's not how the world works. Maybe the world is bigger than you think. For a moment, teacher and student stared at each other. Something passed between them, a silent war that Zora refused to lose. Then Mrs. Holloway smiled. A cold, cruel smile that made Zora's blood freeze. Very well. She turned to face the class, holding up Zora's essay. Class, I want you to watch carefully. This is what happens to liars at Westbrook Academy. She tore the essay in half. The sound was like thunder. Zora flinched as if she had been struck. Mrs. Holloway tore it again, and again, and again. This is what we do with fantasies. This is what we do with delusions. This is what we do when children forget their place. The pieces of paper fell to the floor like dying leaves. 3 pages of careful handwriting. Hours of work. A daughter's love for her parents. Gone. Now, Mrs. Holloway set her voice back to its normal pleasant tone. Clean up this mess and go to the principal's office. Perhaps Mr. Morrison can teach you the importance of honesty since I clearly have failed. Zora didn't move. I said clean it up. Slowly, Zora knelt down and began gathering the pieces of her essay. Her tears fell onto the paper fragments, smearing the ink. From somewhere behind her, she heard Isaiah's voice. She's not lying. Mr. Parker, sit down. I've seen her dad's medals. I've seen pictures. She's not... Isaiah Parker, if you say one more word, I will have your father fired by the end of the day. Do you understand me? One more word. Silence. Zora finished gathering the pieces and stood up. She looked at Isaiah, saw the anguish on his face, the helplessness. It's okay, she mouthed. It wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. But she couldn't let him risk his father's job. Not for her. She walked toward the door, the torn essay clutched against her chest. Zora? She stopped, but didn't turn around. Let this be a lesson. Mrs. Holloway's voice carried to every corner of the room. Character is not about the stories we tell. It's about accepting our place in the world with grace and humility. Trying to be something we're not, especially. When we come from humble backgrounds is the greatest failure of character there is. Zora stood at the door for a long moment. Every eye in the room was on her. 23 children, a dozen parents, one teacher who had just destroyed her in front of everyone. She thought about turning around and screaming. She thought about throwing the torn pieces of her essay in Mrs. Holloway's face. She thought about all the things she wanted to say. But what would be the point? They had already made up their minds. They had looked at her and seen exactly what they expected to see. She walked out the door and into the hallway. Alone? The walk to the principal's office was the longest of her life. The hallways of Westbrook Academy stretched before her like a tunnel with no end. The cheerful posters on the walls seemed to mock her. Honesty is the best policy, proclaimed one. The truth will set you free, announced another. Lies, all of them. Lies that adults told children to make themselves feel better. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and looked at the screen. A text from her father. Meeting running long. Might not make it. I'm sorry, baby girl. I love you. Something broke inside Zora. Something that had been holding on by a thread finally snapped. She leaned against the wall and slid down to the floor, clutching the torn pieces of her essay, and cried. She cried for her father, who was never there. She cried for her mother, who worked so hard and got so little respect. She cried for Isaiah, who couldn't defend her without losing everything. She cried for herself, for the girl who had just learned that truth wasn't enough, that facts didn't matter, that the world would believe what it wanted to believe no matter what she said. She didn't know how long she sat there. Minutes, maybe longer. Then she heard footsteps. She looked up and saw Mrs. Linda Marsh, the school secretary, standing over her with concern on her face. Honey, are you Zora Williams? Zora wiped her eyes and nodded. Mrs. Holloway called. She said you're supposed to see Mr. Morrison. I know. Do you need a minute? No? Zora stood up, forcing her legs to support her. I'm fine. But she wasn't fine. She would never be fine again. The principal's office was at the end of the hall, behind a heavy wooden door that made her think of courtrooms and prisons. She had never been in trouble before. She had never had reason to come here except for awards and achievements. Now she was here because she had told the truth about her father, Mr. Daniel Morrison looked up as she entered. He was a tall man with silver hair and tired eyes, the kind of eyes that had seen too many problems and solved too few. "Zora, please have a seat." She sat in the chair across from his desk, the torn essay still clutched in her lap. "Mrs. Holloway tells me there was an incident during career day. She says you wrote some things in your essay that weren't accurate." "They were accurate," Mr. Morrison sighed. "She says you claimed your father is a lieutenant general, a 3-star general in the Army." "He is." The principal pulled a manila folder from his desk. Zora's name was written on it in black marker. "According to your registration forms, your father is listed as a government employee, Michael Williams. Government employee." "My mother wrote that for security. My father told her to." "Security." Mr. Morrison's voice was patient but skeptical. "Zora, I've been in education for 30 years. I've had military families in my schools. When a high-ranking officer has a child in a school district, there are protocols, notifications, security briefings. We would know. My father doesn't like protocols. He says they draw attention." "A 3-star general who doesn't like attention." Mr. Morrison shook his head. "Zora, that's not how the military works. Generals are public figures. Their families attend official functions. They live on bases or in quarters appropriate to their rank. We live in an apartment so no one knows who we are. And why would a general need to hide? Because there are people who might want to hurt us." Mr. Morrison leaned back in his chair. She could see him making calculations in his head, deciding what to believe. "Zora, I think I understand what's happening here. You love your father. You want him to be special. That's natural. But in a school assignment, we have to stick to the facts." "I am sticking to the facts." "Then where is he, Mr.?" Morrison spread his hands. "If your father is who you say he is, why isn't he here? Why didn't he come to career day to support you?" "He had a meeting at the Pentagon. He said he would try." Mr. Morrison nodded. "That's what Mrs. Holloway told me. He said he would try. Zora, does a 3-star general say, 'I'll try' to his daughter, or does he say, 'I'll be there'?" The words hit her like a slap, because he was right. Her father always said he would try. He never just said yes. Maybe that was the problem. The phone on Mr. Morrison's desk buzzed. "Yes, Mrs. Marsh?" "Sir, I have a call on line 2. A Colonel Davis. He says he's calling from the Pentagon from a General Williams's office. He wants to confirm the general's arrival time." Zora's heart leaped. Her father. He was coming. He was really coming. She looked at Mr. Morrison, waiting for understanding to dawn on his face, but what she saw instead made her stomach drop. The principal glanced at her tear-stained face and her torn essay and her desperate hope, and made a decision. "Thank you, Mrs. Marsh. Tell the caller this is a secure school line. We don't accept unsolicited calls. If he has legitimate business, he can contact us through official channels." "Sir, he was very insistent. He said the general is en route and—" "Mrs. Marsh, please." The line went dead. Zora stared at him in disbelief. "That was my father's office. Someone from the Pentagon was calling to—" "Zora." Mr. Morrison's voice was firm. "I don't know who that was or who put them up to it, but this needs to stop. Involving other people in this story is not appropriate." "It's not a story." "Then explain to me how a 3-star general's family is living in Riverside Heights. Explain to me why his wife cleans houses. Explain to me why there are no security protocols in place for this school." "I already explained." "We live that way so no one knows. We hide so we can be safe." Mr. Morrison was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but unyielding. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to return to Mrs. Holloway's classroom. You're going to apologize for being disruptive. You're going to rewrite your essay with accurate information, and then we're going to forget this ever happened." "I'm not apologizing for telling the truth." "Zora, my father taught me that the truth matters even when no one believes it. He taught me that character is about standing up for what's right even when it's hard. I will not apologize, I will not lie, and I will not pretend to be ashamed of my family." Mr. Morrison's expression hardened. The patient educator disappeared. "Then you leave me no choice. You will return to class and sit silently until I can contact your mother. We'll need to have a serious conversation about honesty and respect." He stood up and opened the door. "Let's go." The walk back to classroom 4B was worse than anything Zora could have imagined. Mr. Morrison walked behind her, his footsteps a steady drumbeat of authority. She could feel his judgment like a weight on her shoulders. When he pushed open the classroom door, every head turned. The career presentations had resumed. Mr. Crawford was talking about something called leveraged buyouts. But he stopped mid-sentence when he saw Zora. Everyone was staring. The parents, the children, Mrs. Holloway sitting at her desk with a small, satisfied smile. "Mrs. Holloway," Mr. Morrison said, "Zora will be rejoining you. She is to remain at her desk and work quietly until I can reach her mother. She will not participate further in today's activities." "Of course, Mr. Morrison. Thank you for handling this." Their eyes met teacher and principal, and something passed between them. An understanding, a shared judgment. Zora walked to her desk in the back corner. She could feel every stare, like a brand on her skin. She sat down. The desktop in front of her was empty. No paper, no pencil. Just a smooth blank surface that reflected nothing. Isaiah caught her eye from across the room. His face was anguished. "I'm sorry," he mouthed. She shook her head slightly. It wasn't his fault. None of this was his fault. The clock on the wall read 10:22 a.m. Her father had said he would try to come by 10. It was now 22 minutes past, and he hadn't come. Maybe he wasn't coming. Maybe he was never coming. The doubt crept in like poison. What if Mrs. Holloway was right? What if Mr. Morrison was right? What if she had imagined everything built a fantasy around a father who was never really there, the meetings that never ended, the promises that never materialized, the "I'll try" that never became "I will"? Maybe her father wasn't a hero. Maybe he was just a man who was very good at making excuses. The tears came back silent and relentless. Mrs. Holloway's voice droned on in the background, praising another wealthy parent, validating another privileged child. The world spun on its axis, unchanged by Zora's pain. She stared at her hands and waited for the day to end. 45 minutes passed. The career presentations concluded. Parents began saying their goodbyes, promising to donate to the school fundraiser, scheduling lunch dates with other wealthy parents. Children chattered about whose family was the most impressive. Nobody talked to Zora. Nobody even looked at her. She had become invisible, which was ironic because that was exactly what her father had always wanted. Mrs. Holloway was organizing papers on her desk when her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face paled. "What is it?" one of the remaining parents asked. "Nothing, just nothing." But her hands were shaking as she set the phone down. At 11:15 a.m., Mrs. Marsh's voice came over the classroom intercom. "Mrs. Holloway, Mr. Morrison needs to see you in his office immediately." The teacher's face went from pale to white. "I'm in the middle of..." "Immediately, Mrs. Holloway." Something in the secretary's voice made everyone stop talking. There was tension there, fear even. Mrs. Holloway stood up slowly. "Classwork on your reading assignments. I'll be right back." She walked out the door, her heels clicking against the floor with slightly less confidence than before. The moment she left, whispers exploded through the classroom. "What do you think happened?" "Maybe someone complained about what she did to Zora." "No way. My mom said Mrs. Holloway is best friends with the superintendent." Isaiah slid out of his seat and crouched next to Zora's desk. "Something's happening," he whispered. "Did you see her face when she looked at her phone?" "I saw." "Maybe your dad called back. Maybe Mr. Morrison finally..." "He hung up on my dad's office, Isaiah. He didn't believe them either." "But something's happening. Something's..." The door burst open. It wasn't Mrs. Holloway. It was Mrs. Patterson, another fourth-grade teacher, and she looked terrified. "Children, I need everyone to stay in their seats. Stay calm. There's nothing to worry about." But her voice said there was everything to worry about. "What's going on?" Madison Crawford demanded. "Where's Mrs. Holloway?" She's in a meeting. I'm going to supervise until she gets back." "Is it about Zora? Is it about what Mrs. Holloway did to her essay?" Mrs. Patterson's eyes darted to Zora, then away. "Just, please, stay in your seats." She was hiding something. Everyone could see it. Isaiah grabbed Zora's hand under the desk. "Something's happening," he said again. "I can feel it." Zora didn't respond. She was listening to something else. A sound. Distant but growing closer. Not the click of heels on linoleum. Not the soft pad of teacher's shoes. This was different. This was the sound of boots. Military boots. Heavy and deliberate moving in perfect rhythm. Other people heard it too. Heads turned toward the door. Conversations died. The footsteps grew louder. Then Mrs. Marsh appeared in the doorway. Zora had never seen the school secretary look so pale. "Mrs. Patterson," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "we have visitors." Behind her, filling the doorway, stood two men. They were tall and broad, dressed in dark suits that looked like they cost more than most people's cars. Their faces were expressionless, their eyes constantly moving, scanning the room with a practiced efficiency that made everyone freeze. They weren't parents. They weren't teachers. They were something else entirely. "Who are they?" Madison whispered, her usual arrogance replaced by genuine fear. Nobody answered. One of the men stepped into the classroom, his gaze sweeping across the children, the desks, the windows. He spoke into a small device on his wrist. "Classroom secure, bringing in Falcon." Then he stepped aside, and then he walked in. The man who entered the classroom was not like anyone Westbrook Academy had ever seen. He was tall, with a bearing that commanded attention without demanding it. His uniform was immaculate, the dark blue fabric of army dress blues pressed to razor sharpness. On his chest was a constellation of medals, ribbons, and colors that told stories of courage and sacrifice. Campaign medals, combat decorations, a silver star, a bronze star with Valor device, a purple heart, and on each shoulder, gleaming like fire under the fluorescent lights, were 3 silver stars. Lieutenant General Marcus Williams had arrived. But he wasn't looking at the teacher. He wasn't looking at the security men. He wasn't looking at the terrified children or the stunned adults. He was looking at the back corner of the room where a small black girl sat alone at her desk with tears drying on her cheeks. His daughter. The classroom was absolutely silent. The kind of silence that happens when the impossible becomes real. Zora looked up. Through her pain and her broken hope, through everything they had done to her, she saw him. Her father. Her daddy. Here. Real. Wearing his uniform with all his medals and all his stars and all the weight of everything he was. "Daddy." The word was barely a whisper, but in that silence it was the loudest sound in the world. And something in General Marcus Williams's face, something ancient and military and perfectly controlled, shattered into 1,000 pieces. He walked toward his daughter, not marching, not commanding, just walking like any father would walk toward a child who needed him. Every eye in the room followed him. He reached Zora's desk and knelt down, the fabric of his decorated uniform creasing against the cheap linoleum floor. He took her small hands in his large, calloused ones. "I'm here, baby girl," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm sorry I was late. I'm so sorry." Zora launched herself into his arms. She sobbed against his chest, against the medals and ribbons and all the symbols of a life she had never been allowed to talk about. She held on to him like he was the only solid thing in a world that had tried to convince her she was crazy. He held her just as tight. "I've got you," he whispered. "I've got you, sweetheart. Nobody is ever going to call you a liar again." The embrace lasted 10 seconds, maybe 20. But in those seconds, everything changed. Every parent in that room understood what they had witnessed. Every child understood. Every assumption, every judgment, every cruel word spoken in the last 2 hours was revealed for exactly what it was. Wrong. General Williams stood up, keeping one hand on his daughter's shoulder. When he turned to face the room, his expression had transformed. The father was gone. The general had arrived. And somewhere in the building in the principal's office where she had been summoned, Mrs. Patricia Holloway was about to learn that the humble girl from the projects, the liar she had destroyed in front of everyone, was about to become the most powerful person in her life. The clock on the wall read 11:47 a.m. Career Day at Westbrook Academy was about to become the most unforgettable day in the school's history, and the reckoning had only just begun. The silence in classroom 4B lasted exactly 7 seconds. Then Madison Crawford's mother stood up from her seat, her designer handbag clutched against her chest like a shield. Is he really a... She couldn't finish the sentence. None of them could. They were all staring at the 3 stars on General Williams's shoulders like they were seeing a ghost. General Williams straightened to his full height, one hand still resting on Zora's shoulder. His daughter had stopped crying, but she hadn't let go of his uniform jacket. Her small fingers were clutched in the dark blue fabric like it was the only thing keeping her anchored to the earth. "Where is Mrs. Holloway?" His voice was calm, controlled, but there was something underneath it, something that made every adult in the room take an involuntary step backward. Mrs. Patterson, the substitute teacher who had been sent to watch the class, opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "I asked a question." She's in Mr. Morrison's office, sir. The principal called her in about 20 minutes ago." "Did he?" It wasn't a question. General Williams turned to one of the security men flanking him. "Davis, please escort Mrs. Holloway and Principal Morrison to this classroom. Immediately." "Yes, sir." The man disappeared into the hallway. His footsteps faded, then returned less than a minute later, accompanied by 2 other sets of footsteps. One confident, one hesitant. Mrs. Holloway walked through the door first. She had clearly been crying. Her mascara was smudged, her carefully styled hair slightly disheveled. But when she saw General Williams standing in her classroom in his full dress uniform with his medals and his stars, something happened to her face. It crumbled. All the confidence, all the certainty, all the righteous conviction that had allowed her to tear up a child's essay and call her a liar in front of 23 witnesses, gone. Principal Morrison entered behind her, his face the color of old paper. "General Williams," he said, his voice cracking on the second syllable. "Sir, I cannot begin to express—" "Don't." The single word cut through the air like a blade. General Williams released Zora's shoulder gently and walked toward the two educators. His boots made no sound on the linoleum, but somehow each step seemed to echo. He stopped directly in front of Mrs. Holloway. "You are Patricia Holloway, 22 years teaching at this school, Teacher of the Year in 2015, photographed with the governor on your wall. Am I correct?" Mrs. Holloway's mouth moved, but nothing came out. "Answer me." Yes, sir. You called my daughter a liar." I didn't know." "You tore up her essay." "General, please, You told her that people like us don't become generals, that we don't belong, that she should know her place." Mrs. Holloway's knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of a desk to keep from falling. "I made a mistake, a terrible, terrible mistake. I am so sorry. I am so—" "You're sorry?" General Williams repeated the words, slowly tasting them. "You destroyed my daughter in front of her entire class, and you're sorry." Café Fonseris. He turned to face the room, the parents, the children, the other teacher who had been too afraid to intervene. "My daughter woke up this morning excited. She put on her best dress. She wrote an essay about her family because she wanted to share something she was proud of. And you," he turned back to Mrs. Holloway, "you took that pride and you crushed it. You took her truth and you called it a lie. You took a 10-year-old child and you made her feel worthless." His voice never rose above conversational level. Somehow that made it worse. "Do you know what my daughter texted me 2 hours ago while I was in a briefing about national security? She texted me, 'Daddy, they don't believe me. They think I'm a liar. Please come.'" He pulled out his phone and held it up. "Please come." 3 words. From a child who has never asked me for anything. A child who has spent her entire life understanding that my job comes first. A child who has watched me miss birthday parties and school plays and dance recitals because I was busy keeping this country safe. He put the phone away. "She asked me for one thing. To come to her school and prove she wasn't a liar. And you know what I almost did? I almost stayed in that meeting. I almost let her down again. Because I thought surely adults at a school would listen to a child. Surely they would give her the benefit of the doubt." He shook his head slowly. "I was wrong." Mrs. Holloway was crying now. Ugly sobs that shook her entire body. I'm sorry, please, General, You're sorry because I'm here. You're sorry because you got caught. But 2 hours ago, when my daughter was standing in front of you with her heart in her hands, you weren't sorry. You were certain." He took one step closer to her. "You were certain that a black family couldn't be what we are. You were certain that a woman who cleans houses couldn't be married to a general. You were certain that my daughter, because of where she lives and what her mother does, couldn't possibly be telling the truth. I made assumptions, terrible assumptions. I was wrong." "You weren't wrong, Mrs. Holloway. You were prejudiced. There's a difference." The word hung in the air like smoke. "Wrong implies a mistake, an accident, a failure of information." General Williams' voice hardened. "What you did was not a mistake. It was a choice. You chose to look at my daughter and see what you expected to see. You chose to ignore her truth because it didn't fit your worldview. You chose to humiliate her because the idea that she could be something more than you imagined was threatening to you. That's not... I didn't... Don't lie to me, Mrs. Holloway. You've done enough lying for one day." Principal Morrison stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "General Williams, please. This is a school. These are children. Perhaps we could continue this conversation in my office where you hung up on my aide-de-camp." Morrison froze. "Colonel Davis called this school to confirm my arrival. Your secretary was told it was from the Pentagon from my office, and you instructed her to dismiss the call as a prank. I thought... You thought my daughter was lying, just like Mrs. Holloway did, because a black family in a modest apartment couldn't possibly have a general in it. That's not what What exactly did you think, Principal Morrison? When my daughter sat in your office and told you her father was a lieutenant general, what went through your mind?" Morrison's mouth opened and closed. I'll tell you what went through your mind. You thought she was making it up. You thought she was a poor black girl with an overactive imagination. You thought she needed to be taught her place just like Mrs. Holloway thought. General, I never used those words. You didn't have to. Your actions said everything. General Williams turned back to face the classroom. The parents were frozen in their seats. The children were staring with wide eyes. And in the back corner, Zora sat at her desk watching her father do something she had never seen before. Fight for her. I want everyone in this room to understand something, General Williams said. What happened today was not a misunderstanding. It was not a failure of communication. It was prejudice, pure and simple. He walked slowly down the center aisle of the classroom, his boots silent on the floor. My wife Grace is one of the most remarkable women I have ever known. She was a registered nurse in Jamaica. She could have pursued her career here. She chose not to. She chose to build something of her own, a cleaning business that she runs with dignity and pride. She chose to be present for our daughter in ways that my job does not allow me to be. He stopped next to the desk of Madison Crawford, whose mother was trying very hard to become invisible. Her work is not lesser. It is not humble. It is not something to be ashamed of. It is service. Honest, honorable service. The same kind of service that every soldier under my command provides. He continued walking. We live in a modest apartment because I believe in security through obscurity, because my position makes my family targets, because I wanted my daughter to grow up normal without the weight of my rank on her shoulders. He reached Zora's desk and turned to face the room again. But you know what I learned today? I learned that my daughter has been carrying a weight far heavier than my rank. She has been carrying the weight of silence, the weight of a secret she shouldn't have had to keep, the weight of being invisible in a world that was supposed to protect her. He looked down at Zora. I'm sorry, baby girl. I should have been here. I should have always been here. Zora grabbed his hand and held it tight. You're here now, Daddy. That's what matters. General Williams squeezed her hand, then turned back to face Mrs. Holloway and Principal Morrison. Here's what's going to happen. I am not going to file a formal complaint with the school board, although I have every right to do so. I am not going to contact the superintendent, although one phone call would end both of your careers. I am not going to make this a national incident, although the press would love this story. Mrs. Holloway's sobbing had quieted to soft whimpers. Instead, I am going to give you an opportunity, the same opportunity you refused to give my daughter, the opportunity to learn. He reached into the inner pocket of his uniform jacket and pulled out something small, a coin, brass heavy engraved with military insignia. This is a command coin. In the military, we give these to people who have earned our respect, people who have shown courage, integrity, honor. He looked at the coin in his hand. I'm not giving this to you because you've earned it, Mrs. Holloway. I'm giving it to you so you can earn it. Every day you see this coin, I want you to remember what you did today. I want you to remember how certain you were, and I want you to ask yourself, who else have I judged? Who else? Who else have I put in a box because of how they looked, or where they lived, or what their parents did? He pressed the coin into Mrs. Holloway's trembling hand. You have a choice. You can be bitter about today. You can be defensive. You can make excuses and blame circumstances and tell yourself you're not really prejudiced. Or you can let this moment change you. You can let my daughter's pain mean something. Mrs. Holloway clutched the coin like it was burning her palm. I don't deserve this, she whispered. No, you don't, but my daughter does. She deserves a teacher who will never do this to another child again. Can you be that teacher, Mrs. Holloway? Can you take what happened today and make something better out of it? For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Mrs. Holloway straightened her spine. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, and she turned to face Zora. She walked to the back of the classroom, her heels clicking against the floor. When she reached Zora's desk, she did something that made every person in the room gasp. She knelt down, a teacher kneeling before her student, an authority figure humbling herself before a child. Zora, she said, her voice raw and broken, I was wrong. Everything I said to you was wrong. Everything I believed about you was wrong. You told the truth and I punished you for it. I tore up your beautiful essay because I couldn't accept that you were more than I imagined. She reached out and took Zora's hands in hers. You are not a liar. You are brave. You are honest. You are exactly the kind of person I should have been celebrating, not destroying. I am so sorry. I am so deeply, truly sorry. Zora looked at this woman who had humiliated her, who had called her names, who had made her feel worthless in front of everyone she knew. My daddy says people make mistakes, she said quietly. He says the important part is what you do after. What can I do? Tell me what I can do to make this right. Zora thought for a moment. Believe kids? Even when their stories sound big. Even when you don't think they could be true. Believe them first. Then check. Mrs. Holloway nodded, tears streaming down her face. I will. I promise you, Zora. I will. She stood up slowly, still clutching the command coin in her fist. Principal Morrison cleared his throat. General Williams, I want you to know that Westbrook Academy will be implementing immediate changes, implicit bias training for all staff, new protocols for handling student claims, a complete review of our actions, Mr. Morrison, not words. I'll be watching. The principal nodded rapidly. Yes, sir. Of course, sir. General Williams turned to address the room one final time. Parents, children, what you witnessed today should never have happened, but it did happen, and now you have a choice about what to do with it. He looked at each face one by one. You can forget. You can walk out of here and pretend this was just an unfortunate incident. You can go back to your lives and your assumptions and your comfortable certainties. His gaze hardened. Or you can remember. You can remember how quickly you believed Mrs. Holloway instead of Zora. You can remember how easy it was to look at a black girl from the apartments and assume she was lying. You can remember that feeling, and you can use it to check yourself the next time you're tempted to judge someone by their circumstances instead of their character. He put his arm around Zora's shoulders. My daughter is going to collect her things now. We're going home. She's had enough lessons for one day. Zora stood up from her desk, but before she could take a step, Isaiah Parker jumped out of his seat. Zora, wait! He ran to her desk, ignoring the startled looks from the adults. I'm sorry I couldn't help you. I wanted to. I tried to say something, but she said she would fire my dad, and I was scared, and I'm sorry. Zora grabbed his hand. Isaiah, it's okay. You tried. That's more than anyone else did. Your dad is the coolest person I've ever seen. General Williams looked down at the boy with the second-hand clothes and the worried eyes. You must be Isaiah. Zora has told me about you. Isaiah's eyes went wide. She said you're the best friend a person could have. She said you stood up for her when no one else would. Isaiah's face flushed. I didn't really do anything. Mrs. Holloway threatened to... You did something. You tried. In a room full of adults who did nothing, you were the only one who had the courage to speak. General Williams extended his hand. That takes a special kind of bravery, young man. I'm proud to know my daughter has a friend like you. Isaiah shook the general's hand, his small palm disappearing into the larger man's grip. Thank you, sir. General, sir. Just General is fine. Thank you, General. From the corner of the room, James Parker appeared in the doorway. The janitor, Isaiah's father. He was still wearing his work uniform, his mop and bucket abandoned somewhere in the hallway. His eyes were wet. He had heard everything. General Williams noticed him and walked over, leaving Zora with Isaiah. Mr. Parker, I understand you're the head custodian here. James straightened up, though he couldn't quite meet the general's eyes. Yes, sir. Have been for 15 years. Your son wrote an essay about you today. I heard about it from my daughter. She said it was the bravest thing she'd ever seen. James blinked rapidly. He talked about how you wake up at 4 a.m, how you make sure the building is clean and safe, how you do the jobs nobody wants to do but everybody needs. I'm just trying to... You're not just anything, Mr. Parker. General Williams's voice was firm. You're raising a son who has more integrity in his little finger than most of the adults in this room. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens because he has a father worth looking up to. James Parker's composure cracked. A single tear escaped down his cheek. Thank you, sir. That means more than you know. General Williams nodded and turned back to his daughter. Ready to go home, baby girl. Zora looked around the classroom one last time, at Mrs. Holloway still holding the command coin, at Principal Morrison still looking shell-shocked, at the parents who had watched her humiliation and done nothing, at the children who had learned in one brutal morning that the world was not always fair. Yes, Daddy, I'm ready. She took her father's hand and walked toward the door. But before they could leave, Madison Crawford's voice rang out. Wait. Everyone turned. Madison stood at her desk, her perfectly styled hair slightly mussed, her expensive clothes suddenly seeming less important. I laughed. When Mrs. Holloway was saying those things, I laughed. Her mother grabbed her arm. Madison, sit down. This isn't... No, Mom. Madison pulled away. I laughed because I thought it was funny. I thought Zora was lying. I thought there was no way someone like her could have a dad like that. She walked toward Zora, her steps uncertain. I'm sorry, I was mean. I've been mean for a long time. And I didn't even realize it until just now, until I saw your dad walk in and I realized that everything I thought I knew was wrong. Zora looked at this girl who had made her life difficult since kindergarten, the whispered comments, the exclusions, the casual cruelty that came so easily to someone who had never been told no. Why are you sorry now because my dad is a general? Would you be sorry if he was just a government worker, like the forms said? Madison opened her mouth, then closed it. I don't know. That's honest, at least. Zora stepped closer to her. Being sorry because you got caught isn't the same as being sorry for what you did. Mrs. Holloway taught me that today. If you want to be different, actually be different. Don't just apologize when it's convenient. Madison nodded slowly. Okay, I'll try. Don't try, do. Zora turned back to her father. Now I'm ready. General Williams smiled a real smile that transformed his stern military face into something warm. That's my girl. They walked out of classroom 4B together, father and daughter, 3 silver stars, and a little girl in a blue dress. Behind them, the room remained silent for a long moment. Then Mrs. Holloway spoke. Children, I want to talk to you about what happened today. She looked at the command coin in her hand. I want to tell you about the biggest mistake I've ever made, and I want to tell you how I'm going to make sure it never happens again. In the hallway, Zora and her father walked past the trophy cases and the motivational posters and all the symbols of a world that had failed her. Daddy. Yes, baby girl. Are you going to be in trouble for leaving your meeting? General Williams laughed a deep, genuine sound that echoed off the walls. I might be. But some things are more important than meetings. Some things are more important than everything else. Like what? He stopped walking and knelt down so he was eye level with his daughter. Like you, Zora. Like your mother. Like being the kind of man my family can be proud of, not just the kind of general the army can be proud of. Zora's eyes filled with tears again, but these were different tears. Happy tears. I'm proud of you, Daddy. I've always been proud of you. I know, baby, and I've never given you enough reasons to be. That changes today. He pulled her into a hug right there in the hallway of Westbrook Academy and held her tight. I love you, Zora, more than the stars on my shoulders. More than any mission or briefing or duty. You are my first priority. From now on, you will always be my first priority. Promise? I promise. They stayed that way for a long moment, father and daughter healing something that had been broken for a very long time. Then General Williams stood up and took Zora's hand. Now let's go home and tell your mother everything. She's going to want to hear every detail. She's going to be mad that she missed it. She's going to be proud of you, just like I am. They walked out of Westbrook Academy into the afternoon sunlight. Behind them, a school was beginning to change, a teacher was beginning to transform, and a community was beginning to question everything it thought it knew. But for Zora Williams, none of that mattered right now. What mattered was her father's hand in hers. What mattered was the truth, finally spoken and finally believed. What mattered was going home. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Isaiah. That was the coolest thing I've ever seen. Your dad is a legend. Zora smiled and typed back one word. I know. The drive home took 23 minutes. Zora sat in the back of the black SUV, her father beside her, still in his full dress uniform. The 2 security men sat up front, their eyes constantly scanning the road. Daddy? Yes, baby girl. Is this how you always travel? With bodyguards? General Williams glanced at the men in front, then back at his daughter. Most of the time, yes, it's part of the job. Then how come I've never seen them before? He was quiet for a moment. Because I always made sure you didn't. I wanted you to have a normal life, Zora. I wanted you to grow up without all of this. He gestured at the military vehicle, the security detail, the trappings of his rank. But that wasn't fair to you, was it, making you invisible so I could pretend you were normal? Zora leaned her head against his shoulder. I don't want to be invisible anymore, Daddy. You won't be. I promise you that. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and sighed. That's the Secretary of Defense's office, 3rd time in the last hour. Are you in trouble? Probably. He put the phone away without answering. But some things are more important than politics. The SUV pulled into the parking lot of Riverside Heights at 12:47 p.m. Grace Williams was waiting at the door of their apartment. She had received 3 phone calls in the last 2 hours. The first from Principal Morrison stammering and apologizing. The second from Mrs. Holloway sobbing uncontrollably. The third from Colonel Davis informing her that her husband had left a classified briefing and was on his way to the school. None of those calls had prepared her for what she saw now. Her husband stepping out of a military vehicle in full dress uniform, medals gleaming in the afternoon sun. Her daughter holding his hand, looking exhausted but somehow taller than she had that morning. And behind them, 2 Secret Service agents scanning the parking lot like they expected an attack at any moment. Marcus Jerome Williams. Grace's voice carried across the parking lot with the authority of a woman who had been married to a general for 15 years. Grace, I can explain? You left a briefing with the Joint Chiefs to go to our daughter's elementary school in full dress blues. Yes. With a security detail. Yes. In front of everyone. Yes. Grace stared at her husband for a long moment. Then she looked at Zora. Baby, are you okay? Zora ran to her mother and buried her face in her chest. Mama, it was awful. Mrs. Holloway tore up my essay and called me a liar and sent me to the principal, and nobody believed me, and then Daddy came and... Slow down, sweetheart, slow down. Grace held her daughter tight, one hand stroking her hair. Over Zora's head, she met her husband's eyes. Tell me everything. They went inside. The security detail took positions outside the door, much to the confusion of the neighbors' Oz who were starting to gather in the hallway. In the small living room of their apartment, General Williams removed his uniform jacket and sat down on the worn couch. He looked suddenly smaller, without it more human. I got her text at 10:15, he said. I was in the middle of a briefing about the situation in the Pacific. Critical intelligence. The kind of thing that usually keeps me chained to my desk. Grace sat down across from him, Zora still pressed against her side. What did the text say? It said, Daddy, they don't believe me. They think I'm a liar. Please come. Grace closed her eyes. Oh, baby. I tried to focus on the briefing. I told myself she was fine, that it was just a misunderstanding, that I couldn't leave. But I kept seeing those words. Please come. She's never asked me for anything, Grace. Not once in 10 years has she ever asked me to put her first. He looked at his daughter. So I excused myself, told the secretary I had a family emergency, got in the car and drove to her school. In full dress uniform. I was supposed to have a ceremony after the briefing. Medal of Honor presentation at Arlington. I didn't have time to change. Grace processed this information. So you missed a Medal of Honor ceremony to go to Career Day? Yes. Marcus, that's... I know what it is. I know what it might cost me. But when I walked into that classroom and saw our daughter sitting alone in the back corner with tears on her face, I knew I made the right choice. Grace was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to Zora. Tell me what happened, baby, from the beginning. Zora told her everything. The essay she had worked so hard on, Mrs. Holloway's laugh, the sound of paper tearing, the name she had been called, the principal who didn't believe her, the phone call from the Pentagon that was dismissed as a prank. By the time she finished, Grace's hands were shaking. That woman called you a liar in front of everyone. She said people like us don't become generals' daughters. She said I should know my place. Know your place? Grace's voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. Mama, it's okay. Daddy handled it. It is not okay, Zora. It will never be okay that someone spoke to you that way. Grace stood up abruptly and walked to the window. She stared out at the parking lot at the security detail that was still drawing curious stares from the neighbors. I've spent 15 years trying to protect her, she said softly. 15 years of living in apartments. We don't need to live in driving cars. We don't need to drive pretending to be people we're not. And for what? So some teacher could look at my daughter and decide she wasn't good enough to tell the truth. Grace. No, Marcus, I'm done. She turned to face him. I'm done hiding. I'm done pretending. I'm done teaching my daughter that she needs to make herself small so the world feels comfortable. What are you saying? I'm saying that when we decided to live this way, we thought we were protecting her, but we weren't. We were just giving people ammunition to hurt her. Dies! General Williams leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. You think we should go public? I think our daughter shouldn't have to defend her own existence to strangers. Grace, there are real security concerns. My position makes us targets. We're already targets, Marcus. The only difference is that now our daughter has to fight those battles alone without any of the resources or support she should have. Zora watched her parents, her head turning back and forth like she was watching a tennis match. I don't want bodyguards, she said quietly. Both of her parents turned to look at her. I don't want to live on a military base or go to a special school or have people treat me different because of who Daddy is. I just want people to believe me when I tell the truth. That's all I ever wanted. Grace sat back down and took her daughter's hands. What do you want, baby? If you could have anything in the world right now, what would it be? Zora thought about it for a long moment. I want to go back to school tomorrow. I want to sit in my regular seat and do my regular work and be a regular kid. But I want people to know that my daddy is a hero. I want to be able to say it without being called a liar. Is that all? No? Zora's voice grew stronger. I want Mrs. Holloway to change. Not because she's scared of Daddy, but because she actually understands what she did wrong. I want her to be a better teacher. I want what happened to me to mean something. Grace and Marcus exchanged a look over their daughter's head. A silent conversation that only 15 years of marriage could produce. Okay, Marcus said finally, then that's what we'll do. Marcus, the press is going to find out about this. The story is too good. 3-star General Storm's elementary school to defend his daughter. It's going to be everywhere. I know. The Pentagon is going to have questions. I know. Your career might... Grace. Marcus reached across and took his wife's hand. I've spent 28 years putting my career first. 28 years of missing birthdays and anniversaries and school plays. 28 years of telling you and Zora that the mission comes first. He squeezed her hand. Today I learned that I was wrong. The mission isn't the country, Grace. The mission is this. Right here. You and Zora. That's what I'm supposed to be protecting. That's what I'm supposed to be fighting for. Grace's eyes filled with tears. You really mean that? I've never meant anything more in my life. Zora threw her arms around both of her parents, pulling them together in a 3-way hug on the worn couch in their modest apartment. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, baby girl. I love you, Mama. I love you more than life itself, sweetheart. They stayed that way for a long time, 3 people holding on to each other in the middle of a storm that was only beginning to build. At 2:15 p.m. the phone call started. The first was from CNN. Someone at the school had taken a photo of General Williams in the classroom and posted it on social media. It had already been shared 10,000 times. The second was from the Washington Post. They wanted a comment on the incident at Westbrook Academy. The third was from the Pentagon's Public Affairs Office. They were fielding inquiries from every major news outlet in the country. General Williams looked at his phone, then at his wife. It's starting. Let it start. We have nothing to hide. The fourth call was different. It came from a number Marcus didn't recognize. General Williams, this is Patricia Holloway. Marcus put the phone on speaker so Grace and Zora could hear. Mrs. Holloway. I know I have no right to call you sir, and I'll understand if you hang up. But I need to tell you something. Go ahead. After you left, I talked to the children, all of them. I told them about what I did and why it was wrong. I showed them the coin you gave me and explained what it meant. Her voice cracked. Then I called the parents, every single one. I told them what happened and I apologized for my behavior in front of their children. Most of them were, well, they were shocked. A few were angry, at me, not at you. Why are you telling me that? Because I want you to know that I meant what I said. I'm not going to let this be just a moment of shame that I try to forget. I'm going to let it change me. Grace leaned toward the phone. Mrs. Holloway, this is Grace Williams, Zora's mother. Silence on the other end. Mrs. Williams, I don't know what to say to you. What I said about your work, about your family, there are no excuses. No, there aren't. I know. My daughter came home crying today because you told her that her mother scrubs toilets. You made her ashamed of me. You made her ashamed of our family. I know, and I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix what you broke, Mrs. Holloway. I know that too. Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that surprised everyone, including herself. But broken things can heal if you're willing to do the work. Mrs. Holloway's breath caught. I am. I swear to you I am. Then prove it. Not with words, with actions. Change your classroom. Change your school. Change the way you look at children like my daughter. I will, I promise. And one more thing. Yes. If you ever call my daughter a liar again, I will come to that school myself. And unlike my husband, I don't have a protocol to follow. The threat hung in the air for a moment. Understood, Mrs. Williams. Completely understood. The call ended. Marcus looked at his wife with new respect. Remind me never to get on your bad side. You've been on my bad side. You survived. Barely. For the first time all day, Zora laughed. A real laugh, free and light. Her parents looked at each other and smiled. Maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. At 4:30 p.m., someone knocked on the door. One of the security men checked and reported back. Sir, it's a James Parker. Says his son is friends with your daughter. Marcus looked at Zora. Isaiah's father. Yes, can he come in, please? Marcus nodded to the security man who opened the door. James Parker stood in the doorway, still wearing his custodian uniform. His eyes went wide when he saw the security detail, then wider when he saw General Williams sitting on the couch in his uniform pants and undershirt. Mr. Parker, please come in. James stepped inside hesitantly, like he was entering a foreign country. General Williams, sir, I'm sorry to bother you. I wanted to thank you for what you said today. About my son. About me. I meant every word. I know you did. That's why I'm here. James twisted his cap in his hands. I've been a janitor for 15 years, and in 15 years nobody has ever talked about my work the way you did. Like it mattered. Like I mattered. You do matter, Mr. Parker. Your son knows it. Your wife knows it. And now everyone at that school knows it too. James's eyes filled with tears. He quickly wiped them away. Isaiah wants to see Zora. He's been texting her all afternoon. Would it be okay if... I know you're probably busy with all this. He gestured vaguely at the security detail and the phone that kept buzzing. Grace stood up. James, would you and Isaiah like to stay for dinner? James blinked. Dinner. Yes, I was going to order pizza because frankly I'm too exhausted to cook, but we'd love to have you. Are you sure I don't want to impose? You're not imposing. You raised a boy who stood up for my daughter when no one else would. The least I can do is feed you. James's face broke into a smile. Then yes, we'd be honored. 20 minutes later, Isaiah Parker burst through the door like a small tornado. Zora, I saw the pictures online. Your dad is everywhere. There's this one photo where he's looking at Mrs. Holloway and she looks like she's about to faint, and it's amazing. Isaiah, calm down, his father said. I can't calm down, Dad. My best friend's dad is a war hero, and I knew about it before everyone else. Do you know how cool that is? Zora grinned at her friend. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. It's the coolest thing that's ever happened at Westbrook Academy. Everyone's talking about it. Madison Crawford posted on her mom's Facebook that she's reflecting on her privilege or something. Madison Crawford doesn't know what privilege means. Neither do I, but I'm pretty sure she has a lot of it. The two children fell into easy conversation the way only best friends can. Within minutes, they were sitting on the floor of Zora's small bedroom, talking about everything that had happened. In the living room, the adults sat together, an unlikely gathering that none of them could have imagined that morning. Grace ordered 4 large pizzas. James offered to pay. Grace refused. Marcus made a joke about pulling rank. Everyone laughed. It was normal. It was ordinary. It was exactly what Zora had wanted. At 6:15 p.m., the story broke on national news. General Williams received a text from Colonel Davis with a link to the CNN article. The headline read, 3-star general confronts teacher who called his daughter a liar. The article included the photo of Marcus kneeling beside Zora's desk, holding her hands. Someone had captured the moment perfectly, the decorated general brought to his knees by love for his child. Well, Marcus said, looking at the screen. I suppose there's no going back now. Grace leaned over his shoulder to read. They're calling you a hero. I'm not a hero, I'm just a father. Sometimes those are the same thing. James Parker looked uncomfortable. We should probably go. You're going to have a lot to deal with. James, stay, please. Marcus set down his phone. Whatever happens, it can wait until tomorrow. Tonight, I want to have dinner with my family and my daughter's friends. Tonight, I want to be a dad. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. They ate pizza on paper plates. They laughed at Isaiah's jokes. They listened to Zora tell the story of her father's entrance from her perspective, complete with dramatic reenactments. And then the door opened and everyone got quiet, and these 2 big men in suits walked in, and I thought maybe it was the Secret Service or something, and then Daddy walked in and, hold on, Marcus interrupted. You thought the Secret Service was there? I didn't know what to think. You never told me you traveled with bodyguards. I was trying to keep you normal. Daddy, nothing about today was normal. Fair point. At 8:30 p.m., the Parkers finally left. James shook Marcus's hand at the door. Thank you for everything. Thank you, James, for raising a good kid and for your service. My service? 15 years keeping that school running, that's service. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. James walked out with his head a little higher than when he walked in. Isaiah hugged Zora at the door. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. Do you think everything will be different now? Zora thought about it. Maybe, but we'll still be us, right? Always. After they left, Zora sat between her parents on the couch, exhausted, but somehow at peace. Daddy? Yes, baby girl? What's going to happen now with your job and everything? Marcus considered the question carefully. Honestly, I don't know. There will be meetings, probably some difficult conversations, maybe some consequences I haven't thought of yet. Are you scared? No. Really? Really? He put his arm around her. Because this thing that could happen already didn't happen. The worst thing would have been leaving you alone in that classroom, believing that no one was coming to help you. Everything else is just politics. Grace leaned her head on her husband's shoulder. When did you get so wise? About 6 hours ago, when my daughter taught me what courage really looks like. Zora yawned, the exhaustion of the day finally catching up with her. Time for bed, sweetheart, Grace said. Can you both tuck me in like when I was little? Of course. They walked her to her small bedroom, past the photos on the walls and the books on the shelves, and all the ordinary things that made up an extraordinary life. Grace pulled back the covers. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed. Daddy. Yes, I'm glad you came today. I'm glad I came too. But I need you to promise me something. What's that? Promise me that even when it's hard, even when there are important meetings and national security things, you'll remember that I need you too. Not always, not every time, but sometimes. Marcus's eyes glistened. I promise, Zora, from now on you're my first priority, always. Always is a big word. It's the right word. Zora smiled and closed her eyes. Grace kissed her forehead. Marcus squeezed her hand. Good night, baby girl. Good night, Daddy. Good night, Mama. They turned off the light and closed the door. In the living room, Marcus and Grace sat together in the quiet. What happens tomorrow? Grace asked. I go back to the Pentagon, face whatever's worrying for me. And Zora? Goes back to school, faces whatever's waiting for her? Do you think she's ready? Marcus thought about his daughter, about the way she had stood in front of Mrs. Holloway and refused to apologize for the truth, about the way she had challenged Madison Crawford to be better instead of just accepting her apology, about the way she had asked her father to remember that she needed him. I think she's been ready for a long time. I think we're the ones who needed to catch up. Grace nodded slowly. I'm proud of you, Marcus, for what you did today. I should have done it years ago. You did it when it mattered. That's what counts. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the muffled sounds of the city outside their window. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions, new battles to fight. But tonight, in their modest apartment in Riverside Heights, the Williams family was together. And for the first time in a very long time, that was enough. At 10:47 p.m., Marcus's phone buzzed one last time. It was a text from an unknown number. General Williams, this is Patricia Holloway. I just wanted you to know that I told my husband everything that happened today, about what I did and what I learned. He asked me why I became a teacher in the first place. I told him I wanted to help children believe in themselves. He asked me how many children I had helped believe in themselves this year. I couldn't answer. A second text followed. Your daughter helped me see something I had forgotten, that believing in children means believing all of them, not just the ones who fit my expectations. I know I have a long way to go, but I wanted you to know that Zora changed me today, and I will spend the rest of my career trying to be worthy of the lessons she taught me. Marcus read the messages twice. Then he typed a response. Mrs. Holloway, growth doesn't come from our successes. It comes from how we handle our failures. You failed my daughter today. Don't fail the next one. He put down his phone and looked at his wife, who had fallen asleep on his shoulder. Tomorrow would be difficult. He knew that, but tomorrow could wait. Tonight, he was home. The alarm went off at 6:30 a.m. Zora opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling. For a moment, she forgot everything that had happened. Then the memories came rushing back like a wave, and she felt her stomach tighten. Today, she had to go back. She lay there for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, listening to the sounds of her parents moving around in the kitchen. The smell of coffee drifted under her door. Voices murmured too soft to make out the words. Finally, she got up. Her mother was at the stove making pancakes. Her father was at the table still in his pajamas, scrolling through his phone with a frown on his face. Morning, baby, Grace said, forcing brightness into her voice. Morning, Mama. Zora sat down across from her father. His coffee was untouched, his food barely eaten. Daddy, what's wrong? General Williams looked up from his phone. The lines around his eyes seemed deeper than they had yesterday. Nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart. That means it's something bad. He set down his phone and managed a small smile. When did you get so smart? I learned from Mama. Grace laughed from the stove, but there was tension in it. What's happening? Zora pressed. Is it about yesterday? Her parents exchanged a look, the silent communication that always made Zora feel like an outsider. Tell me, I'm not a baby. Marcus sighed and pushed his phone across the table. On the screen was a news article with a photo of him kneeling beside Zora's desk. The headline read, General's Dramatic School Confrontation Sparks Pentagon Investigation. Zora's heart dropped. Investigation, what does that mean? It means some people at the Pentagon are asking questions about why I left a classified briefing. But you left to help me. I know, baby, and I'd do it again, but there are rules and I broke some of them yesterday. Grace set a plate of pancakes in front of Zora. Eat your breakfast, sweetheart. Your father will handle it. How can I eat when Daddy might be in trouble because of me? You're not the reason I'm in trouble, Zora. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. I made a choice. My choice. And I don't regret it. But what if they punish you? What if they take away your stars? The question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then they take away my stars. You're more important than my rank, Zora. You always have been. I just forgot that for a while. Zora's eyes filled with tears. I don't want you to lose everything because of me. I haven't lost anything. I've gained something. I've gained perspective. Grace sat down at the table, forming a triangle with her husband and daughter. Zora, listen to me. Whatever happens to your father's career, we will be fine. We have savings, we have each other, and we have our integrity. Those are the things that matter. But Daddy loves the army. I do, hon, Marcus admitted, but I love you more. And yesterday, for the first time in your life, I proved it. The three of them sat in silence, the pancakes growing cold on the plate. Finally, Zora spoke. I'm scared to go back to school. Grace reached over and squeezed her hand. I know, baby. Everyone saw what happened. Everyone knows. Is that a bad thing? Zora thought about it. I don't know. What if they're mean to me? What if they think I got Mrs. Holloway in trouble on purpose? Did you No, I just told the truth. Then that's all that matters. You told the truth and the truth won. Whatever happens today, hold on to that. Marcus checked his watch. I need to go to the Pentagon at 0900. There's a meeting with the Inspector General. Will you be okay? I'll be fine, sweetheart. I've faced enemy fire. I can handle a few bureaucrats. He stood up and walked around the table to hug his daughter. You're going to be okay today, Zora. I believe in you. I believe in you too, Daddy. That's my girl. At 7:45 a.m., the school bus arrived. Zora stood at the window watching it pull up to the curb. Her backpack was on her shoulders, her lunch in her hand, her heart pounding in her chest. You don't have to take the bus, Grace said from behind her. I can drive you. No, I want to be normal. I want everything to be normal. Baby, nothing is going to be normal for a while. You know that, right? I know, but I can pretend. Grace kissed her forehead. Call me if you need anything. I'll come get you in a heartbeat. I know, Mama. Zora walked out the door and down the stairs of their apartment building. The security detail was gone. Her father had sent them away that morning saying they weren't needed anymore. The bus doors opened. Zora climbed the steps, her eyes on the floor. She could feel every pair of eyes on her, could hear the whispers starting before she even reached the aisle. That's her. The general's daughter. My mom said her dad made Mrs. Holloway cry. I saw the video. It's everywhere. Zora kept walking, looking for an empty seat. There weren't many. The bus was full of children who had heard about yesterday, who had seen the photos, who had formed opinions before she even arrived. Then she heard a familiar voice. Zora, over here. Isaiah was waving frantically from a seat near the back. He had saved her a spot. She made her way down the aisle, ignoring the stairs, and dropped into the seat beside him. You okay? He asked quietly. I don't know yet. My dad said your dad might be in trouble. He might be. That sucks. Yeah. Shh. They rode in silence for a few minutes. The whispers continued around them, but Isaiah's presence made it bearable. Hey, he said suddenly, whatever happens today, I've got your back, Okay? Zora looked at her friend at his earnest face and worried eyes. Okay? The bus pulled up to Westbrook Academy at 8:15 a.m. Zora had never seen so many cars in the drop-off circle. News vans, police cars, vehicles she didn't recognize. "What's going on?" she asked. "I don't know," Isaiah said, "but I don't think it's normal." They climbed off the bus and were immediately hit by a wave of chaos. Parents clustered in groups talking urgently. Teachers stood at the entrance herding students inside. And everywhere, people were looking at Zora. A woman with a microphone rushed toward her. "Zora Williams, can you tell us how you're feeling about going back to school today?" A man with a camera appeared behind the woman. "Is it true your father is being investigated by the Pentagon? What do you think should happen to Mrs. Holloway?" Zora froze. The microphone was inches from her face. The camera light was blinding. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Then a hand grabbed her arm and pulled her away. Principal Morrison was there, his face set in a grim expression. "Zora, come with me, now." He hustled her toward the entrance, keeping his body between her and the reporters. "This school is private property," he shouted over his shoulder. "Any media personnel must leave immediately or I will call the police." They pushed through the doors and into the relative quiet of the hallway. "Are you okay?" Morrison asked, breathing hard. "I think so." "I'm sorry about that. We didn't expect them to show up. We've called for additional security." Zora looked at the principal at this man who had dismissed her father's phone call as a prank, who had told her to apologize for telling the truth. "Why are you helping me?" Morrison was quiet for a moment. "Because I owe you an apology, Zora. A real one. What I did yesterday was wrong. I should have listened to you. I should have believed you. But you didn't." "No, I didn't, and I have to live with that." He walked her to the main office where Mrs. Marsh was waiting with a worried expression. "Zora, honey, let me get you some water. You look pale." "I'm okay." "No, you're not, and that's fine. Yesterday was hard. Today is going to be hard too, but we're going to get through it." Morrison's phone buzzed. He looked at it and his face went even paler. "The superintendent is on her way. She wants to speak to everyone involved. The superintendent, Dr. Catherine Brooks, she's not happy about what happened." Zora felt her stomach clench. "Am I in trouble?" "No, Zora, you're not in trouble." Morrison knelt down so he was eye level with her. "You're the only person in this whole mess who isn't in trouble. You told the truth. That's never wrong." At 8:47 a.m., the superintendent arrived. Dr. Catherine Brooks was a tall woman with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had been superintendent of the district for 12 years and had a reputation for being fair but relentless. She walked into the main office like she owned it, because in a way she did. "Where is the child?" she asked, her voice cutting through the nervous chatter. "Right here, Dr. Brooks," Morrison said, gesturing to Zora. The superintendent turned and looked at her. For a long moment she just studied her, taking in every detail. "You're smaller than I expected," she said finally. Zora didn't know how to respond to that. "I've been reading about you all morning, watching videos, looking at photos. Everyone has an opinion about what happened here yesterday. I'm sorry if I caused trouble." Dr. Brooks' expression softened just slightly. "You didn't cause trouble, Zora. You revealed it. There's a difference." She turned to Morrison. "Where is Mrs. Holloway?" "In her classroom. She's been here since 6. "Good. I'll speak with her next. But first, I want to talk to this young lady, alone." Morrison hesitated. "Dr. Brooks, I'm not sure if—" "That wasn't a request, Daniel." He nodded and backed away. Mrs. Marsh followed his son, leaving Zora alone with the superintendent. Dr. Brooks sat down in one of the plastic chairs and patted the seat next to her. "Sit with me." Zora sat. "I'm going to ask you some questions, Zora. I want you to answer honestly. Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. First question, did you deliberately provoke Mrs. Holloway yesterday?" "No, I just read my essay." "Your essay about your father being a general?" "Yes." "And you knew that would surprise people. I knew some people might not believe me, but I didn't think my teacher would call me a liar." Dr. Brooks nodded slowly. "Second question, do you want Mrs. Holloway to be fired?" Zora thought about it carefully. "No." "No?" "She was wrong. She hurt me, but she apologized. And I think she meant it. I think she wants to be better." "That's very mature of you." "My daddy says growth comes from failure. He says the important thing is what you do after you mess up. Your father sounds like a wise man. He is. He's also in trouble because of me. Dr. Brooks's eyebrows rose. Because of you. He left an important meeting to come here. Now the Pentagon is investigating him. I've heard. How do you feel about that? Zora's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. I feel terrible. He came to help me, and now he might lose everything. Do you think he regrets it? No, he said he'd do it again. Then maybe that's your answer. Maybe some things are worth more than careers and promotions and titles. Zora looked at this woman, this powerful stranger who was being unexpectedly kind. Are you going to fire Mrs. Holloway? Dr. Brooks sighed. I don't know yet. That's what I'm here to figure out. Can I say something? Of course. Mrs. Holloway was wrong, but she's not evil. She's been thinking wrong things for a long time, and nobody ever told her to stop. I think if someone helps her see differently, she could be a good teacher again, maybe even better than before. Dr. Brooks studied her for a long moment. You're an extraordinary young woman, Zora Williams. I'm just a fourth grader. Exactly. At 9:15 a.m., Zora was walked to her classroom. The hallway felt different today. The posters on the walls seemed brighter. The air seemed charged with something she couldn't name. Principal Morrison stopped at the door of room 4B. Are you ready? No, but I'm going in anyway. He opened the door. The classroom went silent. 22 pairs of eyes turned to look at her, and standing at the front of the room, clutching a piece of paper in her hands, was Mrs. Patricia Holloway. She looked different. Her hair was less perfect, her makeup minimal. She was wearing a simple dress instead of her usual power suits, and in her hand, visible to anyone who looked closely, was a brass coin. Zora, she said, her voice soft. Please come in. Zora walked to her desk in the back row. Every step felt like a mile. She sat down. The chair creaked. The silence pressed in like a weight. Then Mrs. Holloway spoke again. Class, before we begin today, I need to say something. I've already said it to some of you privately, but now I want to say it publicly. She walked to the center of the room. Yesterday I did something unforgivable. I called one of my students a liar. I tore up her assignment. I humiliated her in front of all of you. She looked directly at Zora. And I was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. Madison Crawford raised her hand. Mrs. Holloway, my mom said you might get fired. I might. Are you scared? Mrs. Holloway considered the question. Yes, I'm terrified. Teaching is my life. But being terrified doesn't change what I did. It doesn't erase the harm I caused. She held up the command coin. General Williams gave me this yesterday. He said it was a reminder that growth comes from how we handle our failures. I've been thinking about that all night. She walked slowly down the aisle toward Zora's desk. I have failed many students over the years, I realize now. Not as dramatically as I failed Zora, but in smaller ways. By making assumptions. By putting children in boxes. By deciding what they could and couldn't be before they ever had a chance to show me. She stopped beside Zora's desk and knelt down. I can't undo what I did yesterday, but I can promise you this, I will never do it again. Not to you, not to anyone. Zora looked at her teacher, at this woman who had destroyed her in front of everyone, who had made her feel worthless, who had now humbled herself in front of the same audience. I believe you, she said quietly. Mrs. Holloway's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. She stood up and walked back to the front of the room. Now, let's talk about what we learned yesterday, not from textbooks, from real life. Tyler Chen raised his hand. Mrs. Holloway, I have a question. Yes, Tyler. Why didn't you believe Zora? Like, what made you so sure she was lying? The room held its breath. Mrs. Holloway was quiet for a long moment. That's a fair question, and it deserves an honest answer. She set down the coin and clasped her hands in front of her. I didn't believe Zora because she didn't look like what I expected a general's daughter to look like. She lives in an apartment. Her mother cleans houses. She wears clothes from Goodwill. In my mind, those things didn't add up to generals' family. But why? Tyler pressed. What do generals' families look like? That's the problem, Tyler. I had a picture in my head, a stereotype, and when Zora didn't fit that picture, I assumed she was lying instead of questioning my own assumptions. Isaiah Parker stood up without raising his hand. That's not fair. My dad is a janitor, and he's the best person I know. Just because someone doesn't have money doesn't mean they're not important. You're absolutely right, Isaiah, and that's what I've been forced to confront. I've spent 22 years teaching here, and I've let wealth and status influence how I see my students. That ends today. The classroom door opened. Dr. Brooks stepped inside, followed by Principal Morrison. Mrs. Holloway, the superintendent said, "May I speak to your class?" "Of course, Dr. Brooks." The superintendent walked to the front of the room. She looked at each student one by one before speaking. What happened in this classroom yesterday is being discussed across the country. Some people are angry, some people are sad, some people are using it to push their own agendas. She paused. But I want to tell you what I see. I see a young girl who told the truth when it would have been easier to lie. I see a teacher who made a terrible mistake and is trying to make it right. And I see a classroom full of children who are about to learn the most important lesson of your lives. She looked at Zora. The truth is powerful, but it's also dangerous. People will try to silence it. They will try to twist it. They will try to make you ashamed of it. Your job is to tell it anyway. Then she looked at Mrs. Holloway. I've decided not to terminate you, but you will be on probation for 1 year. You will complete an extensive training program on implicit bias, and you will work closely with the families in this school to rebuild their trust. Mrs. Holloway's voice shook. Thank you, Dr. Brooks. Don't thank me. Thank Zora Williams. I asked her if she wanted you fired. She said no. She said she believed you could change. The superintendent turned back to the class. I hope you all understand how lucky you are. You have a classmate with more wisdom and compassion than most adults. Learn from her. At 10:30 a.m., Zora's phone buzzed. She wasn't supposed to have it out during class, but she checked it anyway, hiding it under her desk. It was a text from her mother. Daddy's meeting is done. Call me at lunch. Important news. Her heart started racing. Good news, bad news. The text didn't say. The minutes crawled by. Mrs. Holloway was teaching math, but Zora couldn't focus. All she could think about was her father sitting in some conference room at the Pentagon, facing questions about why he had chosen his daughter over his duty. At 11:45 a.m., the lunch bell rang. Zora grabbed her phone and ran to the bathroom. She locked herself in a stall and dialed her mother. Grace answered on the first ring. Baby, are you okay? I'm fine, Mama. What happened? Is Daddy okay? There was a pause. A long pause. Mama, your father is being removed from his current position. The words hit Zora like a physical blow. What? No, they can't do that. Honey, listen to me. It's my fault if I hadn't told him to come, if I hadn't texted him. Zora, listen. Zora went quiet, tears streaming down her face. They're removing him from his current position, Grace continued, because they're promoting him. Zora stopped breathing. What? They're promoting him, baby, to 4 stars, full general. I don't understand. Neither do we, but apparently what happened yesterday made national news. People are calling your father a hero. They're saying he represents what leadership should look like. The Secretary of Defense himself made the call this morning. Daddy got promoted because of yesterday. Because of you, baby. Because he chose his daughter over his career, and the whole country saw what that looked like. Zora sank down onto the bathroom floor, her legs unable to support her. He's going to be a 4-star general. He already is. The ceremony is next week, at the Pentagon. And baby? Yes? They want you there. The secretary specifically asked for you to attend. At 12:15 p.m., Zora walked back into the cafeteria. Her face was still red from crying, but she was smiling. She couldn't stop smiling. Isaiah waved her over to their usual table. What happened? You look weird. My dad got promoted. What? He's a 4-star general now. They promoted him because of yesterday. Isaiah's jaw dropped. Seriously? Seriously. That's insane. I thought he was going to be in trouble. Me too, but I guess sometimes doing the right thing works out. The news spread through the cafeteria like wildfire. Within minutes, everyone was talking about it. Did you hear General Williams got promoted? My mom said it was on CNN. She said he's going to be at the Pentagon ceremony. Madison Crawford approached their table, her tray clutched in her hands. Can I sit with you guys? Isaiah looked at Zora. Zora looked at Madison. Why? Zora asked. Because I want to apologize. For real this time. Not because I got caught, but because I've been thinking about what you said. About being sorry for the right reasons. And I was mean to you because it made me feel powerful. Because my family has money and yours doesn't, and that made me think I was better. But I'm not better. I'm just richer, and that doesn't mean anything. Zora studied the girl who had made her life difficult for years. Sit down, Madison. Madison sat. But if you're mean to me again, we're done. No more chances. I understand. Good. They ate lunch together, the three of them. It was awkward at first, stilted and strange. But by the end, something had shifted. Something small, but real. At 2:30 p.m., the final bell rang. Zora gathered her things and headed for the door. Mrs. Holloway stopped her. Zora, can you stay for a moment? Sure. The other students filed out, leaving them alone. Mrs. Holloway sat down at her desk and gestured for Zora to sit in the chair beside her. I heard about your father's promotion. News travels fast. In this school, always. She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. I want to tell you something. Okay. 22 years ago, when I started teaching, I was idealistic. I believed I could change the world one student at a time. I believed every child had potential, regardless of where they came from. What happened? Life happened. Disappointment happened. I saw students fail. I saw families struggle. I started making assumptions to protect myself from hoping too much. If I expected less from certain students, I wouldn't be hurt when they didn't succeed. She looked at Zora with something like wonder. But you showed me how wrong I was. You showed me that the assumptions I made to protect myself were actually weapons I was using against children, against you. I didn't show you anything, I just told the truth. Exactly. You told the truth even when no one believed you, even when it cost you. That's the kind of courage I forgot existed. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out something. It was Zora's essay, pieced back together with tape, the torn fragments carefully aligned. I saved it, Mrs. Holloway said. After you left yesterday, I pulled it out of the trash and I put it back together. I don't know why. I think I needed to see what I had destroyed. She handed it to Zora. I want you to have it, as a reminder. Not of what I did, but of what you did. You stood up for your family when no one else would. That's something to be proud of. Zora took the essay, feeling the ridges of tape under her fingers. Thank you, Mrs. Holloway. No, Zora. Thank you. At 3:15 p.m., Zora's mother picked her up. Grace was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against their old Toyota, wearing her cleaning uniform. She had come straight from work. How was your day, baby? Better than I expected. Yeah. Mrs. Holloway apologized, in front of everyone, and then she gave me my essay back. Grace looked at the taped-together paper in Zora's hands. She saved it. She said she pulled it out of the trash. She wanted to see what she had destroyed. Grace's eyes filled with tears. That's something. It's not everything, but it's a start. They drove home through streets that looked the same as they always had, past houses and stores and schools that hadn't changed overnight. But something was different. Something fundamental had shifted. Mama, yes, baby, is Daddy really going to be a 4-star general? He really is. What does that mean for us, for how we live? Grace was quiet for a moment. I don't know, we'll have to figure that out together. Are we going to move to a base or a fancy house or something? Would you want to? Zora thought about their apartment, about the worn couch and the small kitchen, and the neighbor who always played music too loud, about the community they had built in Riverside Heights, the friends they had made, the life they had created. I don't know, I like our apartment, but I also like not having to pretend anymore. We don't have to decide anything right now, baby. We have time. They pulled into the parking lot of Riverside Heights at 3:45 p.m. There was a crowd gathered near their building, people with cameras, people with microphones, people shouting questions. Mama? I see them. Stay in the car. Grace got out and approached the crowd. Zora watched through the window as her mother raised her hand. If you want a statement, I'll give you one, then you leave my home. The reporters surged forward, but Grace stood her ground. My husband is a soldier. He has served this country for 28 years. Yesterday he left an important meeting to defend our daughter. Some people call that a dereliction of duty. I call it being a father. She paused, letting the words sink in. We live here because we choose to. We live modestly because we believe in it. My husband's rank does not define our family. Our values do. Mrs. Williams, how do you feel about the promotion? I'm proud of my husband. I've always been proud of him. What do you say to people who think he got special treatment? Grace laughed, but there was no humor in it. Special treatment. My husband has spent nearly 3 decades putting his life on the line for this country. He missed birthdays and holidays and school plays. He was shot twice and never complained. He earned every star on his shoulder, and he'll earn this one too. Will you be moving to a larger home? That's not your business. What about your daughter? How is she handling all this? Grace looked back at the car at Zora, watching through the window. My daughter is the bravest person I know. She told the truth when it would have been easier to lie. She forgave people who hurt her. She showed more grace under pressure than most adults ever manage. If you want a hero to write about her. She walked back to the car and opened the door. Come on, baby, let's go home. They walked through the crowd. Together, Grace's arm around Zora's shoulder, neither of them looking back. At 5:30 p.m., General Marcus Williams came home. He was still in his dress uniform, but there was something different about him. A lightness in his step that hadn't been there before. He walked through the door and immediately swept Zora into his arms. There's my girl. Daddy, you got promoted. I did. I can't believe it. I thought you were going to be in trouble. So did I, honestly. He set her down and looked at his wife. It's been quite a day. Tell us everything. They sat together on the worn couch, the same couch they had sat on 100 times before, and Marcus told them about his day, about the meeting with the Inspector General, who had started by listing the protocols he had violated, about the Secretary of Defense's surprise appearance who had overruled the investigation, about the phone call from the President himself congratulating him on the promotion. The President called you. He did. He said what I did yesterday showed the country what leadership looks like. He said too many people put their careers before their families, and I reminded them what matters most. Grace shook her head in amen or wonder. 28 years of service, and it's one morning at an elementary school that gets you your 4th star. Life is strange. Life is beautiful. Zora leaned against her father's shoulder. Daddy, are we going to have to change now that everyone knows who you are? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Some things will change, baby. People will recognize us. We'll have less privacy. There will be expectations and obligations that come with the rank. That sounds hard. It might be, but you know what won't change? What? This? He gestured at the 3 of them, sitting together on their old couch. Us, our family, our values, that's the foundation, Zora. Everything else is just details. At 7:00 p.m., the doorbell rang. Grace answered it and found James and Isaiah Parker standing in the hallway holding a cake. We heard the news, James said. Thought we'd celebrate. Come in, come in. They gathered around the small kitchen table, 4 adults and 2 children sharing a grocery store cake and telling stories about the day. Isaiah couldn't stop grinning. My best friend's dad is a 4-star general. Do you know how cool that is? I think I have some idea, Zora said, smiling. You're going to be famous now, like actually famous. I don't want to be famous. I just want to be normal. Zora, you were never normal. You were always special. Now everyone else knows it too. They ate cake until they were stuffed. They laughed until their sides hurt. They celebrated a victory that none of them could have predicted. And when the Parkers finally left at 9:00 p.m., Zora stood at the window and watched them walk to their car. Daddy, yes, baby girl, thank you for coming yesterday. I should have come sooner. I should have been there from the beginning. But you came when it mattered. That's what counts. He put his arm around her shoulder. I love you, Zora. I love you too, Daddy. They stood together at the window. Father and daughter watching the night settle over Riverside Heights. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, press conferences and ceremonies and a whole new level of public scrutiny. But tonight, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. A family together. A truth finally told, a future wide open with possibility. And somewhere in a classroom across town, a brass command coin sat on a teacher's desk, catching the last light of the day, waiting to remind its owner of the lessons learned and the promises made. 1 week later, the Pentagon was ready. Zora stood in front of the mirror in her mother's bedroom, staring at herself in a dress she had never worn before. It was new. Actually new. Not from goodwill, not altered from something someone else had discarded. Her father had taken her shopping 3 days ago, just the 2 of them, and let her pick out whatever she wanted. She had chosen blue, the same color as his uniform. You look beautiful, baby. Grace stood in the doorway, wearing a dress of her own. It was elegant and simple, the kind of thing she had never allowed herself to buy before. I look weird, Zora said, like I'm pretending to be someone else. You're not pretending. You're just showing a different side of yourself. What if people stare at me? They will stare at you. You're the daughter of the newest four-star general in the United States Army, but you know what? Let them stare. You've earned this moment." Zora turned away from the mirror and looked at her mother. "Mama, are you nervous?" Grace laughed softly. "Terrified." "Really? Really? I've spent 15 years hiding in the background. Today I have to stand in front of cameras and diplomats and military brass and pretend I belong there." "You do belong there." "I know, but knowing and feeling are different things." They heard the front door open. Heavy footsteps in the hallway. Then Marcus appeared already in his dress uniform, the fabric crisp and perfect. "The car is here," he said. Then he stopped, looking at his wife and daughter. "You two are stunning." "You're biased," Grace said. "Absolutely. Doesn't make it less true." He walked to his daughter and knelt down so they were eye level. "How are you feeling, baby girl?" "Scared, excited, confused." "That sounds about right." He took her hands in his. "Listen to me. Today is going to be overwhelming. There will be important people and cameras and speeches, but I want you to remember something." "What?" "This is your day too, not just mine. Everything that happened, everything that led to this moment started with you, with your courage, with your truth." Zora's eyes filled with tears. "I just wrote an essay, Daddy." "You did more than that. You stood up for our family when no one else would. You taught a room full of adults what integrity looks like. That's not nothing, Zora. That's everything." He pulled her into a hug, careful not to wrinkle her new dress. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. "I've always been proud of you, but today I get to show the whole world why." The drive to the Pentagon took 40 minutes. They rode in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The security detail was back, 2 black SUVs flanking their vehicle men with earpieces and serious faces watching every intersection. Zora pressed her forehead against the window and watched the city pass by. Washington, D.C. looked different from this angle. Grander, more important. "Daddy." "Yes." "Will Isaiah be there?" "He will. I made sure of it." "What about Mrs. Holloway?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "She was invited. I don't know if she'll come." "Why did you invite her?" "Because she's part of this story too. Because growth deserves to be witnessed." Grace reached over and squeezed her husband's hand. "You're a good man, Marcus Williams." "I'm trying to be, finally." The Pentagon appeared ahead of them, massive and imposing. Zora had seen it in pictures, but nothing had prepared her for the reality. It was enormous, a fortress of concrete and glass and power. They pulled up to a private entrance where a group of officers waited. The moment Marcus stepped out of the car, everyone snapped to attention. "General Williams, sir, welcome." "Thank you, Colonel. Is everything ready?" "Yes, sir. The secretary is waiting in the auditorium. The press is assembled. We're ready when you are." Marcus turned back to help his wife and daughter out of the car. Grace took his arm. Zora took his hand. Together they walked into the Pentagon. The hallways were long and intimidating, lined with portraits of generals and admirals and secretaries of defense, men who had shaped history, men whose decisions had changed the world. Soon Marcus's portrait would join them. Zora's head swiveled as they walked, trying to take in everything at once. Officers saluted as they passed. Staff members stopped and stared. Whispers followed them like shadows. "That's him? The general from the news. Is that his daughter, the one from the video? She's so young." They reached a large set of doors guarded by 2 Marine sentries. The Marines snapped to attention as Marcus approached. "Ready, sir?" "Ready." The doors opened. The auditorium was packed. Hundreds of people filled the seats, a sea of uniforms and suits and cameras. At the front was a podium with the seal of the Department of Defense. Behind it, an American flag hung perfectly still. The moment they entered, everyone stood. The applause started slowly, then built into a thunderous wave. Zora felt it in her chest, a physical pressure that made it hard to breathe. "Just keep walking," her mother whispered, 1 foot in front of the other. They made their way down the center aisle toward the front row, where seats had been reserved for them. Zora saw faces she recognized from television. Generals, politicians, people who made decisions that affected millions of lives. And then she saw Isaiah. He was sitting 3 rows back, wearing a suit that was obviously new and obviously uncomfortable. His father was beside him, looking equally out of place. But when Isaiah saw Zora, his face broke into an enormous grin, and he gave her a thumbs up. She felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. They reached the front row and took their seats. Grace on one side, Zora on the other. The applause continued for another 30 seconds before finally dying down. A man in a dark suit approached the podium. The Secretary of Defense. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, members of the press, welcome to the Pentagon. We are gathered here today to witness the promotion of one of the finest officers this nation has ever produced." He paused, letting the words settle. "Lieutenant General Marcus Williams has served this country with distinction for 28 years. He has commanded troops in combat. He has advised presidents. He has made decisions that have saved countless lives." The secretary looked out at the crowd. "But that's not why we're here today." A murmur rippled through the auditorium. "We're here because last week General Williams showed us something that has become too rare in our society. He showed us what it looks like when a leader puts principle above politics, when a father puts his family above his career, when a man with everything to lose chooses to do the right thing anyway." He turned to look at Marcus. General Williams received a text message from his daughter while he was in a classified briefing. She told him that her teacher had called her a liar, that her essay about her father had been torn up in front of her class, that no one believed her. The auditorium was absolutely silent. General Williams could have stayed in that meeting. He could have finished his briefing and dealt with the situation later. That's what most people would have done. That's what protocol demanded. The secretary shook his head. Instead, he excused himself. He put on his dress uniform, and he drove to his daughter's school to prove that she was telling the truth. He looked at Zora, and she felt the weight of every eye in the room turned toward her. That young lady is here today. Zora Williams, 10 years old, who had the courage to tell the truth even when no one believed her, who stood in front of her classmates and refused to apologize for who her father was, who showed more integrity in one morning than many adults show in a lifetime. The applause erupted again, this time directed at her. Zora felt her face burning, her hands trembling. She wanted to disappear into her seat, but her father reached over and took her hand. "Stand up, baby," he whispered. "Let them see you." She stood on shaking legs and faced the crowd. The applause intensified. People were on their feet now, clapping and cheering and crying. Through the blur of tears, she saw Mrs. Holloway. The teacher was standing near the back of the auditorium wearing a simple dress, her face wet with tears. She was clapping too, but there was something else in her expression. Pride. Gratitude. Wonder. Zora nodded at her just slightly. Mrs. Holloway nodded back. Then Zora sat down and the ceremony continued. "It is my honor and privilege," the secretary said, "to promote Marcus Williams to the rank of general. 4 stars, the highest rank achievable in peacetime." He turned to Marcus. "General Williams, please step forward." Marcus rose from his seat and walked to the podium. His uniform was perfect. His posture was perfect. But Zora could see his hands shaking slightly at his sides. Grace was called up next to pin the new stars on her husband's shoulders. She walked with grace and dignity, her head held high. When she reached Marcus, he leaned down and whispered something in her ear. She laughed softly and wiped a tear from her eye. The old stars were removed. The new ones were pinned in place, 4 silver stars on each shoulder glinting under the lights. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you General Marcus Williams." The auditorium exploded. People were standing cheering, cameras flashing. The noise was deafening. Zora watched her father accept the applause with quiet dignity, but his eyes kept finding hers in the crowd. When the noise finally died down, Marcus stepped to the microphone. "Thank you, Secretary. Thank you all for being here today." His voice was steady, commanding the voice of a man who had led troops into battle. "I've been asked to give a speech about leadership, about service, about what it means to wear this uniform. And I will. But first, I want to talk about something else." He looked at Zora. "I want to talk about my daughter." The room went quiet. 1 week ago, Zora wrote an essay for Career Day. She wrote about me, about her mother, about our family. She told the truth and she was punished for it. His voice tightened with emotion. Her teacher didn't believe her. Her principal didn't believe her. They looked at our address and our income and the work my wife does, and they decided that our story was too big to be true. He paused. "They were wrong, but here's what breaks my heart. I almost let them be right." A murmur went through the crowd. When I received my daughter's text, I was sitting in a briefing about national security, important stuff, the kind of thing that usually keeps me chained to my desk. And for a moment I thought about staying. I thought about finishing the meeting and dealing with my daughter later. That's what I had always done. That's what my career demanded. He shook his head. But then I read her message again. "Daddy, they don't believe me. They think I'm a liar. Please come." 3 words, "please come." And I realized something. He looked at Grace, then back at Zora. I had spent 28 years serving my country. I had missed birthdays and anniversaries and school plays. I had put my duty above my family 1,000 times, and my country had given me medals and promotions and recognition. He touched the 4 stars on his shoulder. But my daughter had never asked me for anything. Not once. She had watched me leave over and over again, and she had never complained. She had accepted that Daddy's job came first, and she had made her peace with it. His voice cracked. Until last week. Last week, for the first time in her life, she asked me to choose her. She asked me to put her first, and I almost didn't. The auditorium was silent. Even the cameras had stopped clicking. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something. These stars on my shoulders don't mean anything if I can't be the father my daughter deserves. This uniform doesn't matter if I can't protect the people I love. All the medals in the world are worthless if my family has to sacrifice their dignity for my career. He straightened up. I got this promotion because I did something that should have been obvious. I chose my daughter. I chose my family. I chose to be a human being instead of just a general. And the fact that this is considered exceptional, the fact that this is considered heroic, tells me that we have our priorities badly wrong. He looked out at the crowd, at the generals and politicians and dignitaries. Leadership isn't about sacrificing everything for the mission. It's about knowing what matters most and fighting for it. It's about having the courage to be vulnerable. It's about teaching our children that they are more important than our careers, more important than our titles, more important than anything else in this world. He turned to face Zora directly. Zora, I failed you for 10 years. I put my job above you. I made you carry secrets you shouldn't have had to keep. I made you feel like you had to earn my attention instead of knowing that you already had it. His eyes were wet. But I want you to know something. I am not here today because I'm a great general. I am here because you are an extraordinary daughter. You taught me what courage looks like. You reminded me what really matters. You gave me a chance to be the father I should have been all along. He stepped away from the microphone and walked to the front row. He knelt down in front of Zora's seat just as he had knelt in her classroom 1 week ago. I love you, Zora, more than my stars, more than my career, more than anything else in this world. And I will spend the rest of my life proving it. Zora threw her arms around her father's neck and held on tight. The auditorium erupted again, but this time it wasn't just applause. It was something deeper. People were crying openly. Generals were wiping their eyes. The Secretary of Defense was struggling to maintain his composure. They stayed that way for a long moment, father and daughter holding on to each other in front of hundreds of witnesses. Then Marcus stood, took Zora's hand, and walked back to the podium. I'd like to invite someone else to speak, he said. Someone who was instrumental in teaching me this lesson. He looked toward the back of the auditorium. Mrs. Patricia Holloway, would you please come forward? A gasp went through the crowd. Whispers exploded everywhere. That's the teacher. The one who called his daughter a liar. Is he serious? Mrs. Holloway stood frozen in place, her face white with shock. She hadn't expected this. She had come to witness, not to participate. Please, Marcus said, come forward. Slowly, hesitantly, Mrs. Holloway made her way down the aisle. Every eye followed her. Every camera captured her progress. She reached the front and stood beside Marcus, looking like she wanted to run away. Mrs. Holloway is the teacher who tore up my daughter's essay, Marcus said. She's the one who called Zora a liar. She's the one who humiliated her in front of her classmates. The murmurs grew louder, hostile. But she's also the one who apologized, who admitted she was wrong, who is committed to changing the way she sees the world. He turned to face her. Mrs. Holloway, would you like to say something? Patricia Holloway stood at the microphone looking out at a sea of faces that had every reason to hate her. Her hands were shaking. Her voice was barely a whisper. I don't deserve to be here. The words were honest, raw. A week ago, I destroyed a child's spirit because I couldn't accept that my assumptions were wrong. I looked at Zora Williams and saw what I expected to see. A poor black girl with an overactive imagination. A liar who needed to be put in her place. She took a breath. I was wrong, I was prejudiced, I was cruel, and there is no excuse for any of it. She looked at Zora. General Williams gave me something that day, a command coin. He said it was a reminder that growth comes from how we handle our failures. I've been carrying it with me ever since. She reached into her pocket and held up the brass coin. Every day I look at this coin and I remember what I did. Not to punish myself, but to remind myself that I can be better, that I must be better. She turned back to the crowd. I have been teaching for 22 years. In that time, I have probably hurt dozens of children the way I hurt Zora. Children I put in boxes because of how they looked or where they lived. Children whose stories I dismissed because they didn't fit my expectations. Her voice cracked. I can't undo that damage, but I can try to do better. I can try to see every child as Zora taught me to see her, as a person with their own truth, their own value, their own potential. She looked at Marcus. General Williams, you could have destroyed me. You could have had me fired. You could have made me a villain in the national press. Instead, you gave me a chance to change. I will spend the rest of my career trying to be worthy of that chance. She turned to Zora. And Zora, I know an apology isn't enough. I know words can't heal what I broke, but I want you to know that you changed me. A 10-year-old girl changed a 54-year-old woman who thought she knew everything. You showed me that truth is more powerful than prejudice. That courage is more important than comfort. That every child deserves to be believed. She reached out her hand toward Zora. Thank you for not giving up, for not letting me win, for being braver than I could ever be. Zora looked at the hand extended toward her. She looked at the woman who had humiliated her, who had called her names, who had made her feel worthless. Then she took the hand and pulled Mrs. Holloway into a hug. The auditorium fell completely silent. Then slowly the applause began. It started in the back and rolled forward like a wave. Within seconds, everyone was standing, crying, cheering. Two people who had every reason to be enemies embracing in front of the world. The Secretary of Defense stepped back to the microphone, wiping his eyes. I have attended hundreds of ceremonies in my career. I have never witnessed anything like this. He shook his head in wonder. General Williams, Mrs. Holloway, Zora, you have shown us what redemption looks like, what forgiveness looks like, what true leadership looks like. This is not just a promotion ceremony. This is a lesson that this entire country needs to learn. After the ceremony, there was a reception. The Pentagon had transformed a large conference room into an elegant space with food and drinks and soft music. Important people mingled. Cameras continued to flash. But Zora didn't care about any of that. She found Isaiah near the refreshment table, stuffing his face with shrimp. This is the fanciest food I've ever eaten, he said, his mouth full. Do you think they'll notice if I fill my pockets? Probably. There are like 100 cameras in here. Worth it, though. These shrimp are amazing. They stood together watching the adults do their adult things. Generals shaking hands, politicians making speeches, everyone trying to be seen with the new 4-star general. Hey, Isaiah said quietly. You okay? I think so. It's a lot. Yeah. A week ago, we were just 2 scholarship kids trying to survive 4th grade. Now you're famous, and your dad's got 4 stars, and Mrs. Holloway is giving speeches about how you changed her life. Weird, right? Super weird, he grinned. But kinda cool, too. Isaiah, Zora. They turned to find Grace approaching with James Parker. There you two are. We've been looking everywhere. We're hiding from the cameras, Isaiah said. Smart kids, James said. I've been doing the same thing. Grace knelt down so she was eye level with both of them. I just wanted to say thank you, both of you. Isaiah, you stood up for my daughter when no one else would. That took courage. I didn't really do anything. Mrs. Holloway threatened to fire my dad. You tried. That's more than most people did. James put his hand on his son's shoulder. I'm proud of you, son. I've never been more proud. Isaiah's face turned red, but he was smiling. A commotion near the entrance made everyone turn. Mrs. Holloway was standing there looking uncertain about whether to enter. Zora walked over to her. Mrs. Holloway, are you okay? I shouldn't be here. This is for family and important people. You're important. Mrs. Holloway looked at her with something like wonder. After everything I did to you, how can you say that? Because you're trying to change. That matters. She took her former teacher's hand and led her into the reception. Come on, I'll introduce you to my friend Isaiah. His dad is the head custodian at our school. He's one of the most important people I know. The evening ended with a final surprise. General Williams gathered everyone's attention and called Zora to the front of the room. I have one more announcement to make, he said. The Secretary of Defense has created a new award. It's called the Williams Family Courage Award, and it will be given annually to a young person who demonstrates exceptional integrity in the face of adversity. He looked at his daughter. The first recipient is Zora Williams. The crowd applauded as a medal was placed around Zora's neck. It was smaller than her father's medals, but somehow it felt heavier. Speech, someone called out. Speech, speech. Zora looked at her father in panic. You don't have to, he whispered. But she thought about everything that had happened. about standing in front of Mrs. Holloway's class, about refusing to apologize, about telling the truth even when no one believed her. She stepped to the microphone. "I'm just a fourth grader," she said. "I don't know how to give speeches." A few people laughed. "But I know some things. I know that telling the truth is hard. I know that sometimes adults don't believe kids. I know that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us are the ones who hurt us." She looked at Mrs. Holloway. "I also know that people can change. That mistakes don't have to be forever. That forgiveness is harder than anger, but it feels better in the end." She looked at her parents. "My daddy missed a lot of things when I was growing up, important things. But he didn't miss last week. He showed up when it mattered, and that taught me something." She paused. "It taught me that it's never too late to do the right thing. It taught me that love is more important than pride. It taught me that my truth is powerful even when nobody believes it." She touched the medal around her neck. "I don't know if I deserve this award. I just did what my parents taught me to do. I told the truth. I stood up for my family. I refused to be ashamed of who I am." She looked out at the crowd. If there are any other kids out there who feel invisible, who feel like no one believes them, who feel like they have to pretend to be something they're not, I want you to know something. Her voice grew stronger. Your truth matters. Your story matters. You matter. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day, people will see you. People will hear you. People will believe you. Don't give up. Don't stay quiet. Don't let anyone tell you that your story is too big to be true. She stepped back from the microphone. The silence lasted for 3 heartbeats. Then the room erupted. 3 months later, Westbrook Academy unveiled a new program. It was called The Truth Project, and it was designed by Mrs. Patricia Holloway with input from students, parents, and community members. The program focused on teaching children about implicit bias, the importance of listening, and the courage to tell their own stories. Mrs. Holloway led the first session herself. Zora sat in the front row watching her former tormentor become something new. The command coin sat on Mrs. Holloway's desk, was visible to everyone, a reminder of where she had been and how far she had come. "We all have biases," Mrs. Holloway was saying. "We all make assumptions about people based on how they look or where they live or what their parents do. The question isn't whether we have these biases. The question is what we do about them." She looked at Zora. 3 months ago, I did something unforgivable. I called a student a liar because I couldn't believe that someone like her could have a story like hers. I was wrong. And I hurt a little girl who had done nothing but tell the truth. She held up the command coin. But that mistake taught me something. It taught me that my assumptions were weapons. It taught me that every time I put a child in a box, I was limiting what they could become. It taught me that believing in children means believing all of them, not just the ones who fit my expectations. After the session, Isaiah found Zora in the hallway. "That was actually pretty good," he said. "Mrs. Holloway seems different." "She is different." "Do you trust her now?" Zora thought about it. "I trust that she's trying. I trust that she means what she says. But trust takes time. She'll have to keep proving it." "Fair enough." Isaiah grinned. "Hey, you want to come over after school? My dad's making his famous spaghetti." "Your dad's spaghetti is famous. It is in our apartment, 3-time winner of the Parker Family Cooking Championship. There's only 2 of you in your family?" "Exactly. Very competitive." Zora laughed, a real laugh, free and light. "Okay, but I have to call my mom first. Use the office phone. Mrs. Marsh loves you now." "Mrs. Marsh loves everyone. She especially loves you. I heard her telling Principal Morrison that you're the best student Westbrook has ever had." "She did not say that." "She might have. Or I might have made it up. Either way, you should believe it, because it's probably true." They walked together down the hallway, past the trophy cases and the motivational posters and all the symbols of a world that was slowly, imperfectly learning to be better. At 6:00 p.m., the Williams family had dinner together. It had become a tradition over the past 3 months. No matter how busy Marcus was, no matter what meetings or briefings or crises demanded his attention, he was home for dinner every night, without exception. "How was school, baby girl?" "Good. Mrs. Holloway did the first Truth Project session today." "How did it go?" "Better than I expected. She told the whole class about what she did to me. She didn't make excuses or try to make herself look better. She just told the truth." Grace set a plate of rice and beans on the table. "That takes courage." "That's what I thought. She's not the same person she was 3 months ago." "People can change," Marcus said. "Not everyone does, but some people do. Mrs. Holloway is trying to be one of those people. Do you think she'll succeed? I don't know, but I believe in giving people the chance to prove themselves. After dinner, they sat together on the couch. The same worn couch in the same modest apartment. They had talked about moving about, getting a bigger place that matched Marcus's new rank, but in the end, they had decided to stay. This was home. This was where they had learned to be a family again. Daddy? Yes, baby girl. Are you happy? Marcus looked at his daughter, at the woman he loved, at the life they had built together. Happier than I've ever been. Even though you're busier than ever. Even though? He put his arm around her. Being busy isn't the problem. The problem was forgetting what I was being busy for. I was so focused on serving my country that I forgot to serve my family. Now I try to do both. Is it hard? Sometimes. There are days when I want to stay at work, when there are meetings I should attend and problems I should solve. But then I remember your face when you saw me walk into your classroom. I remember how you said, Daddy, like you couldn't believe I was real. His voice grew thick. And I know that nothing in my career will ever be more important than being there when you need me. Grace leaned her head on his shoulder. You've become a good man, Marcus Williams. I was always trying to be good. I just got confused about what good meant. Zora snuggled between her parents, feeling safe and loved and seen. Daddy, yes, I'm glad you came that day. Me too, baby girl. Me too. 1 year later, Zora stood at another podium. This time, she was at the National Education Conference addressing 2,000 teachers from across the country. Her father sat in the front row wearing his dress uniform with his 4 stars gleaming. Her mother sat beside him, proud and beautiful. Good morning, Zora said into the microphone. My name is Zora Williams, and 1 year ago, my teacher called me a liar. The audience was silent, captivated. She didn't believe that my father was a general. She didn't believe that my mother's work had dignity. She looked at me and saw a poor black girl from the projects, and she decided that my truth was too big for someone like me. She paused. She was wrong. But here's the thing. She's not evil. She's not a monster. She's a human being who made assumptions, the same kind of assumptions that all of us make every day. She looked out at the sea of faces. I'm not here to tell you how to teach. I'm 11 years old. I don't know anything about curriculum or pedagogy or standardized testing. But I know what it feels like to be dismissed. I know what it feels like to be put in a box. And I know that every child in your classroom carries a story that might surprise you. She stepped away from the podium and walked to the edge of the stage. Believe them. Even when their stories seem impossible. Even when they don't fit your expectations. Believe them first, and then ask questions. Because the alternative, calling a child a liar when they're telling the truth, can break something that takes years to repair. She returned to the microphone. My teacher and I are friends now. She changed. She grew. She let my pain teach her something. But not every child is as lucky as I was. Not every child has a father who will storm into their classroom to prove they're telling the truth. Her voice grew stronger. So I'm asking you, all 2,000 of you, to be the kind of teachers who don't require proof. Be the kind of teachers who believe in children before you believe in your own assumptions. Be the kind of teachers who look at a poor kid from the apartments and see infinite possibility instead of limited potential. She straightened up. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you for listening. The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes. Afterward, in the quiet of the hotel room, Zora sat with her parents. You were amazing, Grace said. I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Marcus said. It's doing what needs to be done despite the fear. You sound like a fortune cookie. I sound like a father who's proud of his daughter. Zora smiled and leaned against him. Daddy? Yes. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come that day, if you had stayed in your meeting? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes. In my worst moments, I imagine it. I imagine you sitting alone in that classroom believing that no one cared enough to fight for you. I imagine the light going out of your eyes little by little until you stop believing in your own truth. He pulled her closer. But that's not what happened. I came, and everything changed. Everything changed, Zora agreed. She looked at her mother, at her father, at the family they had built through struggle and sacrifice and love. You know what I learned this year? What's that? I learned that truth is powerful, but truth alone isn't enough. You need people who believe in you, people who fight for you, people who show up when it matters. She took both of her parents' hands. I'm lucky, I have those people, but a lot of kids don't. That's why I keep telling my story, because maybe somewhere out there a teacher will hear it and think twice before calling a child a liar. Maybe a parent will hear it and remember to show up for their kid. Maybe a kid will hear it and know that their truth is worth fighting for. Grace wiped tears from her eyes. When did you get so wise? I learned from you, both of you. Marcus kissed the top of her head. No, baby girl, we learned from you. They sat together in the quiet hotel room, a family that had been through fire and come out stronger. Outside, the world continued to spin. There would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight, more truths to tell. But tonight, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. A father who had learned to put his family first. A mother who had never stopped believing. A daughter who had changed the world by refusing to be silent. And a truth that had proven once and for all that courage doesn't need to be loud. Sometimes it just needs to walk through the door. Sometimes it just needs to stand up and say, I am not a liar. This is who I am. And sometimes that's enough to change everything. Zora Williams learned that lesson at 10 years old, standing in a classroom with torn paper at her feet and tears on her cheeks. She would spend the rest of her life teaching it to others, because the truth once spoken can never be unheard. And a child who believes in herself can never be defeated. That is the end of Zora's story. But it is also the beginning. The beginning of a world where every child is believed, where every truth is honored, where every family knows that love is stronger than rank, stronger than prejudice, stronger than anything that tries to tear us apart. That world is not here yet, but it is coming, one brave voice at a time.